Hello lovelies, in this video we're going to be going through your AQA A-Level Psychology Paper 3, the big one, all of the units that we've written for 2024. So use the timestamps to jump between the units so that you just revise the bits that you actually need.
Strong evaluation skills are essential, so let's have a look at this structured approach to writing evaluation points. Firstly, begin by giving a point. Begin with a succinct and clear statement of the identified strength or limitation. For instance, if you're focusing on a strength, highlight a positive aspect of the topic. If it's a limitation, pinpoint an area of concern. You should then explain. Following the initial point, dig into the specifics. Offer a detailed explanation of why the identified point is a strength or limitation. This is the crux of your analysis, providing the necessary context and depth. Finally, offer a consequence. Conclude the paragraph by exploring the consequences of the identified strength or limitation. This involves discussing the impact on the overall quality or reliability of the work, drawing connections between the specific point and its broader implications. Let's now look at a model evaluation paragraph together. Zimbardo's research is, however, criticised for overestimating the levels of conformity. The paragraph begins by presenting a clear and concise point, asserting that Zimbardo's research is criticised for overestimating levels of conformity. This establishes the focus of the analysis and guides the reader toward the specific aspect under consideration. From 1973 highlights that only a third of participants exhibited violent and brutal behaviours, suggesting that the extent of conformity might have been exaggerated. Most of the participants were able to resist conforming to the social roles they were assigned. The rest of the guards were supportive of the prisoners and attempted to treat them in a supportive way. Following the initial point, the paragraph delves into a detailed explanation provided by From 1973. The explanation highlights that only a third of the participants exhibited violent and brutal behaviours, implying that the extent of conformity in Zimbardo's study might have been exaggerated. The paragraph provides specific information regarding the behaviour of the participants, offering an understanding of the criticism. This challenges the external validity of the study, raising concerns about its ability to accurately reflect real-world scenarios where not everyone may conform to extreme social roles. The paragraph proceeds to discuss the consequences of the identified limitation. It emphasises that most participants resisted conforming to the assigned social roles, and some guards even showed supportive behaviour towards the prisoners. This not only challenges the external validity of Zimbardo's study, but also raises concerns about its ability to accurately reflect real-world scenarios. By exploring the consequences, the paragraph goes beyond pointing out a limitation to underscore its broader implications for the study's validity and applicability. The paragraph effectively uses the point-explain-consequence structure by presenting a clear criticism point, supporting it with specific evidence and context, explain, and discussing the broader implications for the study's validity, consequence. The use of From's critique adds depth to the evaluation, providing a counter-perspective to Zimbardo's findings. The paragraph structure enhances the clarity and coherence of the evaluation, guiding the reader through a well-organised evaluation of the research on conformity. Section A. Issues and debates in psychology. You should answer all of the questions in this section. There are 24 marks available, and in the exam you should aim to spend around 30 minutes on this section. Outline what is meant by ethical implications of psychological research. There are 2 marks available for the question. The mark scheme states that to gain the full 2 marks, the concept or ethical implications needs to be well defined, and then a detailed explanation of this needs to be given. This suggests a structure for the response, providing a definition and then extending this and giving additional detail in some way, and that should ensure that you achieve both of the marks. Here is a model response. Ethical implications refer to the considerations and consequences related to the moral principles and standards that guide how psychological research should be carried out. The focus is on protecting and respecting the rights of participants and considering how the research and its findings could impact on wider society. The provided answer is a good response to the question because it concisely outlines the meaning of ethical implications and it's in the context of psychological research. It starts off by defining ethical implications as the considerations and consequences related to the moral principles and the standards that guide research. This definition highlights the importance of adhering and sticking to ethical guidelines when conducting research. The answer then goes on to emphasise the key aspects of ethical implications, such as respecting the rights of research participants and considering the potential impacts of the research findings on wider society. By mentioning and including these aspects, the answer demonstrates an understanding of the complex nature of ethical considerations, and it extends the definition in a way that will secure the second mark. So overall, it effectively addresses and answers the question by giving that clear and succinct definition of what is meant by ethical implications and then giving additional detail. Both marks would be awarded. Outline what is meant by hard determinism. There are 2 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that in order to secure both of those marks, the concept hard determinism should be first well defined, and then some additional detail should be given to extend that definition. It is an outline question, so brief statements and sentences would be appropriate, but you must make sure that that additional point and that extension is provided to get the second mark. Here is the model response. Hard determinism asserts that every event, including human actions and choices, is predetermined by previous events. It denies the existence of free will, suggesting that individuals have no genuine choices or control over their actions. This answer is a good response to the question because it offers a clear and concise explanation of the concept of hard determinism. It begins by giving the definition and defining hard determinism as the belief that all events, including human actions and choices, are predetermined by preceding events. This definition effectively captures the key idea of hard determinism. In the second sentence, it goes on to explain how hard determinism denies free will. And again, this is another key aspect of hard determinism. By stating that hard determinism suggests that individuals have no genuine choices or control over their actions, the answer again effectively conveys the fundamental idea of determinism. And it's by extending the definition in this way that it ensures that the second mark is secured. A student is predicted to achieve grade 9 across all subjects at GCSE this summer. Their parents both graduated with first-class degrees from the country's highest performing university. What is meant by the interactionist approach? Explain why taking an interactionist approach may be useful to explain the student's academic performance. There are 4 marks available for the question. The mark scheme says here that to achieve 3 or 4 marks, there should be an understanding of interactionism, and this should be clear and well explained. This will help to address the first part of the question, where it asks what is meant by the interactionist approach. A definition of this should be given to show and illustrate your knowledge. The mark scheme goes on to say that application to the student's academic performance is strong and in-depth, and this will address the second part of the question. Explain why taking an interactionist approach may be useful to explain the student's academic performance. Consider this when presenting information in the response and how links to this scenario can be made. Each of the points that you do present should be applied in some way. The answer should be cohesive, so there needs to be a clear structure, and technical language should be used whenever possible. Let's take a look at this model response. Interactionism considers how both biological characteristics, nature, and environmental factors, nurture, interact to influence behaviour or outcomes. This would be useful when considering the student's academic performance, as it would look at both their inherent abilities as well as the impact that their environment could have. It would consider whether their intelligence has occurred biologically, potentially being inherited from their parents, or whether it is as a result of a nurturing and encouraging home life that has promoted academic excellence. Taking this interactionist approach allows for analysis of the interplay between biological and environmental factors, contributing to a more thorough explanation of the student's achievements. The provided answer effectively explains the interactionist approach and then demonstrates its relevance to the scenario. It starts off by defining interactionism and how it considers both biological and environmental factors and how these impact on behaviour. It also accurately references and links this to the nature and nurture debate. This shows a secure knowledge of interactionism. The definition accurately captures the main features of the interactionist approach, emphasising the importance of both inherent traits and external influences. The response then goes on to address the second part of the question and to explain why this approach would be useful in explaining the student's academic achievement. The answer demonstrates the use of taking this interactionist approach by highlighting that the approach would consider both the student's inherent abilities, potentially inherited from their highly educated parents, as well as acknowledging the impact of their nurturing and encouraging home environment. It analyses the interaction between the two types of factors and how the interactionist approach would give a more comprehensive understanding of the student's achievements. There are clear links back to the student and their family. Remember that in questions like this, where there is a scenario, you should make sure that information is consistently linked back to it. Consider it in every sentence that you present. How can you make it link in some way? So overall, the answer is effective because it gives a clear definition and explanation of the interactionist approach and does link it consistently to the scenario. Discuss idiographic and nomothetic approaches to psychological research. There are 16 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that to achieve in the top mark band, an understanding of the two approaches should be evident and well explained. There should be a discussion or an evaluation of the approaches, and this should be strong and in-depth. The answer needs a clear structure and to be cohesive, and technical language should be used throughout and always in an accurate and an appropriate way. We know that for 16 mark discuss questions that both AO1 and AO3 marks will be available. AO1 knowledge and AO3 evaluation. There'll be 6 marks of AO1 and 10 marks of AO3. We can see how this links with the mark scheme, that for the first bullet point, the understanding of the approaches links to AO1 knowledge, and then the second bullet point, the discussion, links to the AO3 evaluation marks that are available. It also helps us to consider the structure, that we need to know there needs to be a description, an outline of the approaches, and then they need to be discussed and evaluated. In terms of evaluation, both strengths and limitations of the approaches need to be included. You need to remember that these evaluation points don't need to be equal. You don't need to present the same number of strengths and limitations, but both need to be included in the response. You should also consider the importance of fully extending these evaluation points. Remember that there are more AO3 points available than AO1. So your evaluation and the depth of this evaluation is really key to the response's success. Let's take a look at this model response. AO1 material will be highlighted in blue and AO3 material will be highlighted in pink. The ideographic approach emphasises the uniqueness of individuals, focusing on understanding and describing specific cases through methods like case studies. It involves studying a single person to gain insight into their personality development using subjective and in-depth qualitative methods such as interviews and personal narratives. This approach is commonly employed in clinical psychology to design treatment for individual needs and is associated with psychodynamic and humanistic approaches. An example of this is Freud's Little Hands case study, looking at the personality development in a child emerging from in-depth conversations with their parents. One strength of this approach is that it recognises how complex human behaviour can be. By focusing on understanding and describing specific individual cases, it allows researchers to appreciate the unique circumstances that shape an individual's behaviour. This has been observed in cases like Clive Waring, and it allowed detailed investigation into the impact of his brain damage. This depth of understanding can lead to rich insights into human behaviour that may be overlooked by nomothetic approaches. Interpretations can be subjective, though, and can be influenced by the researcher's bias, and this can lead to a lack of objectivity. Since the ideographic approach often relies on qualitative methods, researchers may introduce their own biases or preconceptions into the interpretation of data. This subjectivity can undermine the reliability and validity of findings, as interpretations may be influenced by the researcher's personal beliefs, values, or theoretical perspectives. The nomothetic approach is different in that it aims to identify general laws and principles that are applicable to a whole group or population. It wants to establish generalisations and patterns. It uses quantitative research methods, statistical analyses, and experiments to achieve objectivity. It uses standardised procedures that allow for replication and reliability. This approach is widely used in experimental psychology and behavioural studies to identify universal principles. It is associated with behavioural approaches and work like that of Skinner. This is because he used a sample of animals to draw conclusions about wider behaviour patterns. A strength of the nomothetic approach is its ability to produce findings that can be applied to larger populations. By seeking to identify general laws, it allows the development of theories and frameworks that can inform understanding across diverse contexts. This broad applicability enhances the practical use of research findings, as they can be used to inform interventions, policies, and practices that benefit a wide range of individuals. The emphasis on general principles may, however, neglect the impact of specific context on behaviour, though. It may overlook the importance of individual differences and unique environmental factors that influence behaviour. Averages and general trends derived from nomothetic research may not accurately represent the experiences of individual members within a population, leading to a potential oversimplification or misunderstanding of complex human behaviour. The response provides a thorough discussion of both ideographic and nomothetic approaches to psychological research. Each of the approaches is described in detail, and it highlights key characteristics and the methods that are associated with it. So, for example, for the ideographic approach, the emphasis is on understanding individual uniqueness through methods like case studies, interviews, and personal narratives. And through these, qualitative, detailed information is gathered. A specific research example has also been included in the case of Freud's Little Hands case study, and knowledge of the methodology used here is given, those in-depth conversations with Little Hands as parents. Similarly, for the nomothetic approach, it's described and it identifies that it searches for general laws and principles. It includes the methods that will be used by the approach in terms of experiments, and again it gives an example from Skinner's research. Following each of the descriptive paragraphs, you'll note that the evaluation immediately is presented. An approach is described, and then that specific approach is evaluated. It would make no sense in a question like this to describe both of the approaches and then to revisit each of them in turn and to evaluate. You can see from the pink and blue here that the answer switches backwards and forwards between AO1 and AO3 material, and that gives the response a clear structure. Each of the evaluative paragraphs follows a structured approach. Begin with a point that introduces either the strength or the limitation, followed by an explanation of how this impacts the approach, why is it a strength or why is it a limitation, and then concludes with a consequence or an implication of the point. If we look at the first evaluative paragraph for the ideographic approach, we'll see that the strength is identified, that the approach recognises the complexity of human behaviour. It then goes on to explain this by saying that by focusing on these specific individual cases, it really allows the researchers to appreciate unique and individual characteristics, and it backs this up with an example of an individual case study in the case of Clive Waring. It concludes by saying that this depth of understanding gives us rich insights into behaviour, and it starts to draw even a comparison to the nomothetic approach, that the nomothetic approach wouldn't do this. In the second paragraph on the ideographic approach, it identifies a limitation in the fact that interpretations can be subjective, and it explains why this is the case, because the ideographic approach relies on qualitative methods. It concludes by saying, therefore, that levels of reliability and validity may be low. In the evaluation of the nomothetic approach, it takes this same structured response to the evaluation. A strength is identified, that the nomothetic approach is able to produce findings that can be applied to large populations. It explains it in the fact that it allows the development of theories and framework that will really help understand diverse contexts. And the conclusion is that the research and the approach enhance the practical use of research findings, and it can be used in real life to inform policy and procedures. In the limitation paragraph, it identifies what the limitation is, that the approach may neglect the impact of specific contexts on behaviour. It explains this by saying that it will overlook individual differences and how averages and general trends will not necessarily represent everybody. It concludes by saying that the approach, therefore, may oversimplify behaviour and that misunderstandings could occur. Technical language has been used throughout the response. Terms such as the ideographic approach and nomothetic approach, which have been presented in the question, but as well as quantitative methods, objectivity, standardised procedures. They are all used appropriately and really strengthen the discussion around the methodologies and the characteristics of each of the approaches. So overall, the response offers a really comprehensive discussion of ideographic and nomothetic approaches. It gives a clear description, examples, and evaluations for each. The structure is really clear, description and then evaluation, and this really enhances the clarity and coherence of the response. Technical language is used, and this adds, again, another level of depth to the discussion. Section B. There are 3 optional topics within this section of the exam paper, and these are relationships, gender, and cognition and development. You will have studied just one of these topics. You should just select one topic from this section and then answer all the questions for your chosen topic. There are 24 marks available, and in the exam you should aim to spend around 30 minutes completing these questions. Discuss the absence of gating in virtual relationships. There are 8 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that there needs to be an understanding of the impact of absence of gating in virtual relationships. This should be evident and well explained. So this is looking for accurate and detailed subject knowledge. There then needs to be a discussion of the effects of the absence of gating. This comes in the form of discussing the strengths and limitations. The answer needs to be cohesive, there needs to be a clear structure, and technical language needs to be used throughout the response. For a discuss question, we know that both AO1 knowledge and AO3 evaluation marks will be available. AO1 links with the understanding of the material, and AO3 links with the discussion and evaluation. There'll be 3 marks of AO1 and there'll be 5 marks of AO3. Here is a model response. AO1 material will be highlighted in blue and AO3 material will be highlighted in pink. The absence of gating in virtual relationships refers to a lack of filters or barriers in communication, such as anxiety, physical attractiveness, or shyness. Information flows freely without restrictions, and there are no predefined checkpoints or stages that regulate the exchange of personal details or emotions. Gating typically involves setting boundaries or controlling the pace of disclosure in a relationship, but the absence of gating implies a more open and immediate sharing of thoughts and feelings. As a result, virtual relationships may involve rapid and unrestricted sharing of personal information, potentially leading to a quick deepening of the connection. Research evidence has supported the idea that the absence of gates can influence the development of relationships. Using questionnaires, Roseman and Sophia 2006 found that people found it easier to share non-conventional aspects of their identities in online environments. This includes aspects that they would not have shared as easily in real life due to the presence of gates. This is evidence to support the idea that people feel more comfortable to share more truthful information about themselves when communicating in virtual relationships. Further support comes from McKenna et al. 2002, who found that physical attractiveness dominates in offline relationships and overpowered traits that would lead to a more meaningful relationship. They concluded that the absence of physical gating features leads to more successful relationships for those who struggle to establish offline relationships. Again, this clearly shows the impact that an absence of gating can have on how confident people feel in relationships. It also shows how relationships could be formed with a broader group of people based on shared interests and values when the issue of physical appearance is removed. The research in the area is, however, heavily reliant on self-report methods, with the results coming from questionnaires and interviews. This could be a problem, as people may be more likely to share information that they feel is socially desirable. Some people may find it difficult to admit that physical attractiveness is a significant factor when considering a relationship. As a result, the findings may not be the truth and be lacking in validity. The response provides a thorough discussion of the absence of gating in virtual relationship. It explains the concepts clearly and provides examples to illustrate its implications. The absence of gating is described in detail, highlighting how it leads to unrestricted communication without filters or barriers, allowing for immediate sharing of thoughts and feelings. Examples are provided, such as the influence of physical attractiveness and the ease of sharing non-conventional aspects of identity in online environments. After this AO1 material, the response then goes on to discuss and to evaluate the research in this area. Each of the 3 evaluative paragraphs uses the point, explain, consequence structure. Let's take a look at the first AO3 paragraph as an example. It firstly identifies the point that there is supporting evidence. It explains this by citing Roseman and Sophia's 2006 research and their findings that people found it easier to share non-conventional aspects of identity online. The consequences are given that this evidence suggests and supports the idea that people feel more comfortable to share more truthful information when communicating in a virtual way. The second and third evaluative paragraphs go on to use this same point, explain consequence structure, and this ensures that the right amount of detail is given to reach the top mark band and to meet that criteria, that the discussion is strong and in-depth. Technical language is used throughout the response. Terms such as absence of gating, virtual relationships, questionnaires, self-report methods. Using these terms shows a strong understanding of the subject. So overall, the response offers a comprehensive discussion of the absence of gating in virtual relationships, providing clear and detailed AO1, providing supporting examples, and the AO3 evaluation material being fully explored in that structured way. Technical language has been used, and this adds further depth to the discussion. Discuss evolutionary explanations for partner preferences. There are 16 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme here that to achieve in the top band, so to achieve between 13 and 16 marks, an understanding of the evolutionary explanations should be evident and well explained. So there needs to be secure subject knowledge, and this needs to be fully developed and lots of detail given. There then needs to be a discussion of the evolutionary explanations, and this needs to be strong and in-depth. This means there needs to be an evaluation of these explanations, and this should include strengths and limitations. Again, this needs to be in-depth, so these need to be fully explained. The answer needs to be cohesive, and technical language should be used throughout. Remember for discuss questions that both AO1 knowledge and AO3 evaluation marks are available. There will be 6 marks of AO1 and 10 marks of AO3. This should be reflected in the amount of AO1 and AO3 material that you present in your answers. Always make sure there is more AO3 material. Remember, in the evaluation, strengths and limitations both need to be addressed, but this does not need to be done in an equal way. You do not need to present the same number of strengths as limitations. As long as both are present, this is absolutely fine. Also remember that this question is in the context of partner preference and not just a generic evaluation and discussion of evolutionary explanations. You must make sure that the work is linked back to partner preference whenever you possibly can. Here is a model response. AO1 material will be highlighted in blue, and AO3 material will be highlighted in pink. Darwin proposed that traits enhancing an individual's ability to mate and reproduce are favoured by natural selection. These traits include a low waist-to-hip ratio in females, as this has been found to be associated with youthfulness and higher levels of fertility. Another example is height in males, as this suggests a level of strength and fitness that would result in healthy offspring. Anisogamy, the difference in male and female sex cells, results in a surplus of fertile males due to the production of numerous sperm, while simultaneously leading to a relatively limited availability of fertile females, as they produce fewer eggs. This prompts competition amongst males for mating opportunities. This leads to 2 types of sexual selection, inter- and intrasexual selection. Intersexual selection refers to the process by which members of one sex, typically females, choose mates based on specific traits or characteristics exhibited by individuals of the opposite sex, typically males. This process can lead to the evolution of exaggerated characteristics, such as a height in males, as tall males are more likely to attract females and pass on their genes to future generations. This is supported by research by Buss 1989. He looked at mate preferences across 37 different cultures and found that men did prefer young and physically attractive females, and that females looked for mates who were ambitious and could provide. This supports the idea that intersexual selection does take place, and both sexes look for characteristics that will increase the success of reproduction. Intrasexual selection refers to the process by which members of one sex, typically males, compete for access to females. They will engage in competitive behaviours to establish dominance and secure mating opportunities. Researchers have been able to provide support for this idea and shows that males will carry out risk-taking behaviour to show off their abilities. Diamond 1992 said that males will engage in extreme sports and even drug-taking behaviours to illustrate their strength. This shows how males will compete with other males to show that they would be more successful mates in future. However, this explanation fails to explain partner preference in same-sex relationships, as reproductive success is not a key factor. Lawson et al. 2014 looked at the content of dating adverts and found that the same traits, physical attractiveness and provision of resources, were still sought after. There must therefore be alternative explanations for these preferences that are not offered by evolutionary ideas. They also fail to account for rapidly changing societal norms and roles that have impacted on the relevance of certain mate preferences in contemporary contexts. Females are active within the world of employment and so are less reliant on males to provide, and this suggests that this would no longer be a key consideration for them. Online dating is also very popular, where people focus on shared values and interests instead of physical characteristics. This again suggests that other factors must play a key role in partner preference. This response provides a comprehensive discussion of evolutionary explanations for partner preference. The answer begins by outlining key evolutionary concepts, such as traits enhancing reproductive success, anisogamy, and sexual selection. These concepts are explained clearly with examples provided, such as the association between low waist-to-hip ratio and fertility in females, and the preference for height in males, indicating strength and fitness. Further knowledge is shared about intersexual selection and intrasexual selection. Note that AO1 material is presented in different locations here. It is not just in one chunk of AO1 followed by a chunk of AO3. Intersexual selection is described and then supporting evaluative research is presented. The point by Buss in 1989. This means that supporting evidence is provided straight after an AO1 knowledge point, providing the evidence that corroborates and supports it. The answer then moves back to AO1 and outlines and describes intrasexual selection. The answer then returns again to AO3 and provides the discussion material, the AO3 evaluation, around intrasexual selection. Moving backwards and forwards between AO1 and AO3 in a response is absolutely fine and it can be a real strength. It would make no sense here to talk about intersexual selection and intrasexual selection and then return to both to evaluate later. This wouldn't be a logical response and would detract from the overall quality. The evaluation paragraphs that have been presented here all follow the point, explain and consequence structure. We see this in the first paragraph, supporting intersexual selection. The point is made that there is supporting research, and this is provided by Buss 1989. This is explained with lots of detail that he looked at mate preferences across 37 different cultures, and his findings that men did prefer young, physically attractive females, and females wanted those who were ambitious and could provide for them. It then gives the consequence that the research clearly supports the idea that intersexual selection does take place. We see the point, explain, consequence structure in the later evaluative paragraphs too. Let's take a look at this final one, looking at a limitation. It makes the point that it fails to account for rapidly changing societal norms. It explains this and what these norms are and how they have changed. Females are now much more active within the world of employment and therefore less reliant on males. And as a consequence, it suggests that other factors must play a key role in partner preference. The consequence always gives a very clear link back to the question. Technical language has been used throughout the response. Terms like anisogamy, intersexual selection, intrasexual selection are used appropriately. These terms add precision to the discussion and demonstrate a strong grasp of the subject matter. So overall, the response offers a thorough discussion of evolutionary explanations for partner preferences. It provides clear AO1 explanations and examples and extended AO3 evaluations. It uses supporting research which shows great subject knowledge, and technical language is used consistently throughout the answer. Section B. There are 3 optional topics within this section of the exam paper, and these are relationships, gender, and cognition and development. You will have studied just one of these topics. You should just select one topic from this section and then answer all the questions for your chosen topic. There are 24 marks available, and in the exam you should aim to spend around 30 minutes completing these questions. Discuss biological explanations for atypical gender development. There are 8 marks available for the question. We can see here from the mark scheme that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve between 7 and 8 marks, there should be a clear understanding of the biological explanations of atypical gender development. This accurate subject knowledge should be very clear and well explained, so lots of detail needs to be given. Also states that there needs to be a discussion of these biological explanations, and this means that these need to be evaluated, so the strengths and limitations need to be presented. It says that these should be strong and in-depth, and it is important that these evaluative points are fully explored. This will be key to the answer's success. The response needs to be cohesive and technical language needs to be used throughout. Remind yourself that for a discuss question, the AO1 knowledge and AO3 evaluation marks will be awarded. AO1 knowledge links to the first mark in the bullet point, showing you understand the explanations. And AO3 evaluation links to the second point, showing that you can discuss them, that you have information and an understanding of the strengths and limitations surrounding the explanations. Remember, this is not a generic question, just looking at their biological approach or biological explanations. It is in context of atypical gender development, so links need to be made to this throughout. Here is a model response. AO1 material will be highlighted in blue, and AO3 material will be highlighted in pink. Brain sex theory proposes that the development of gender identity is influenced by the structure and function of the brain, particularly the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, the BST. It suggests that differences in BST size between males and females may contribute to gender identity development. Research by Krujver et al. 2000 found that transgender females have BST sizes more similar to those of cisgender females. Additionally, studies such as Joe et al. 1995 suggest that individuals with gender dysphoria may have a brain structure that aligns more closely with their identified gender rather than their assigned gender at birth, indicating the potential role of brain anatomy in atypical gender development. Genetics could also play a role in atypical gender development. Research such as the twin study, like Halens et al. 2012, found a 39% concordance rate for gender dysphoria among monozygotic twins, supporting the genetic basis of atypical gender identity, and the idea that this could be inherited. These explanations remove fault from individuals by attributing the condition to biological factors. This can alleviate feelings of guilt or self-blame, as individuals may recognise that their experiences are influenced by medical causes rather than personal shortcomings. As a result, these explanations may aid acceptance and understanding of atypical gender development within both affected individuals and society. However, labelling atypical development as a psychological disorder could be negative. Applying a diagnostic label implies that individuals with atypical development are ill and in need of treatment, which can perpetuate stigma and discrimination. This labelling may reinforce negative societal attitudes towards gender diversity and contribute to marginalisation rather than acceptance. Another limitation of biological explanations is that they take a reductionist approach. By attributing the causes of atypical gender development solely to biological factors, these explanations may oversimplify the complexity of the condition. Gender identity disorder is a multifaceted phenomenon influenced by a variety of biological, psychological, and social factors. Biological reductionism overlooks the interplay between these factors, potentially leading to incomplete understandings and inadequate approaches to treatment and support. This response provides a comprehensive overview of biological explanations for atypical gender development and effectively addresses the question posed. The answer begins by introducing the brain sex theory Explain how the structure and function of the brain, specifically the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, can influence gender identity development. The inclusion of research studies helps to describe the explanation and is used in an AO1 manner here. Additionally, the response uses the twin study to illustrate the genetic basis of gender dysphoria. Again, this is using a research finding to provide an explanation and showing knowledge of the explanation. These examples add to the quality of the description by grounding it in scientific research. The answer then evaluates the implications of these biological explanations by considering both their advantages, strengths, and limitations. You see here that there are 3 evaluative paragraphs looking at both strengths and limitations. Remember, as we've said before, evaluation doesn't need to be equal. There doesn't need to be the same amount of strengths as weaknesses. As long as both are included, that is absolutely fine. The important factor about your evaluation material is that it is fully explained, fully developed, and linked back to the question. Let's have a look how this has been done in this response. We can see in the first AO3 paragraph that a strength is identified, the point is made that these explanations remove fault from individuals. This is explained by saying it will remove feelings of guilt or blame. And the consequence of this is that it will support acceptance and understanding. This is done again in the second paragraph. The point is made, this time with a limitation, that labelling atypical development as a disorder could be negative. This is explained. Why is this a negative? Because it can perpetuate stigma and discrimination. And the consequence, as a result, there can be negative attitudes within society around gender diversity. We see it again in the final paragraph. The limitation is identified, the point is made that biological explanations take this reductionist approach. Explained by saying that these explanations will oversimplify the complexity of the topic because they just focus on biological factors. And the consequence is that actually these explanations may be incomplete or inadequate, and this could have implications for treatment and support that they suggest. Technical language has been used throughout, terms such as the brain area, the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, gender dysphoria, concordance rates. These are all used accurately and contribute towards the quality of the response. So, in conclusion, this response is a great answer to the question because it provides an outline, a description of the biological explanations for atypical gender development. Research evidence is provided to support, and this is done through the description and the evaluation. Evaluative points have all been fully extended and technical language has been used throughout. Discuss psychodynamic explanations of gender development. There are 16 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme here that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve between 13 and 16 marks, a clear understanding of the psychodynamic explanations should be evident and well explained, so there needs to be accurate subject knowledge and lots of detail needs to be given. There should then be a discussion of the psychodynamic explanations, and this should be strong and in-depth. Discussion here means evaluation, presenting the strengths and the limitations of the psychodynamic explanations. In-depth means that these need to be fully extended and explored. The answer needs to be cohesive, and technical language associated with the psychodynamic explanations need to be used wherever possible. Remember that for discussed questions, AO1, knowledge, and AO3 evaluation marks can both be awarded. 6 marks of AO1 knowledge and 10 marks of AO3 evaluation available. Remember for the evaluation that strengths and limitations need to be presented, but this does not need to be done in an equal way. There does not need to be the same amount of strengths as there are limitations. As long as both are included in some way, this is absolutely fine. Also note that this question is not just a generic question about psychodynamic explanations. it's presented in the context of gender development, so links need to be made to this throughout. Here is the model response. AO1 material is highlighted in blue, and AO3 material is highlighted in pink. Psychodynamic explanations of gender development, rooted in Freudian theory, emphasise the significance of psychosexual stages and conflicts in shaping personality and gender identity. Central to this explanation are the phallic and genital stages, occurring between ages 3 and 6. During the phallic stage, children become aware of their genitalia, with boys experiencing the Oedipus complex and girls the Electra complex. The Oedipus complex involves boys unconsciously desiring their mothers while feeling rivalry towards their fathers. Freud suggested that successful resolution includes identification with the father, leading to the development of the superego and establishment of gender identity. Similarly, the Electra complex involves girls desiring their fathers and competing with their mothers. Successful resolution involves identification with the mother and internalisation of her values, facilitating successful gender identity development. Freud argued that unresolved conflicts during these stages could lead to gender identity issues and psychosexual disturbances. Psychodynamic explanations highlight the pivotal role of early childhood experiences and unconscious desires in shaping gender identity formation. One strength of these explanations is the supporting evidence provided by case studies such as Little Hans, Freud, 1909. Little Hans exhibited fear of horses, which Freud interpreted as symbolic of castration anxiety stemming from the Oedipus complex. This case illustrates how individual experiences can manifest symbolically and provides insight into the unconscious conflicts shaping gender identity. Additionally, the focus on individual case studies, as seen in Freud's work, offers in-depth insights into the complexity of human behaviour and development. By looking at individual experiences, psychodynamic theory can provide understandings of gender development processes. However, a limitation comes from contradictory evidence. Studies such as Bose and Sanford, 2010, have found no significant difference in gender identity among children raised by same-sex parents. This contradicts the notion that the Oedipus and Electra complexes, which involve opposite-sex parent fixation, are crucial for gender identity development. Data from 63 children raised by same-sex parents revealed that children with lesbian parents were less likely to conform to traditional gender stereotypes, challenging the emphasis on opposite-sex parent relationships in psychodynamic theory. Another limitation is the suggestion that gender development may begin before the phallic stage, contrary to Freud's theory. Kohlberg proposed that gender development is a gradual process rather than being specific to the phallic stage. This challenges Freud's ideas and suggests that other factors may play significant roles in early gender development. Consequently, the rigid framework of psychodynamic theory may overlook the complexity and variability of individual gender development. This response effectively addresses the question by providing a comprehensive discussion of psychodynamic explanations of gender development. The response begins by describing the core aspects of Freudian theory, emphasising the importance of psychosexual stages and conflicts, and particularly the phallic and genital stages in shaping gender identity. This is the detail and extended explanation that is required. By including concepts such as the Oedipus and Electra complexes, the answer demonstrates a clear understanding of psychodynamic theory and its relevance to gender development. The answer then goes on to evaluate the explanation, and we can see that 2 strengths and 2 limitations have been given. Remember that we said it doesn't need to be equal in this way. Sometimes it will be. As long as strengths and limitations are both included in some way, that is absolutely fine. We can see that for each of the evaluative paragraphs, the use of the point, explain and consequence structure have been used. We see this illustrated particularly well in the final paragraph, It identifies the limitation that gender development may begin before the phallic stage, and this is in contradiction to Freud's idea. The point is identified. This is then explained by comparing it to Kohlberg's ideas that gender development is a gradual process. The consequence is that Freud's rigid framework may overlook the complex nature of gender development. We said in order to get the correct level of depth and exploration in evaluative points, use this point, explain, and consequence structure. Technical language has been used throughout the answer, things such as psychosexual stages, Oedipus complex, and Electra complex, and these are all used accurately and really enhance the quality of the response. So overall, the answer is a strong response to the question because it has a clear description of psychodynamic explanations of gender development, and these are detailed. There is then a thorough evaluation, each point being fully explored and extended, and there is good use of technical language. These elements contribute to a well-rounded and thorough discussion of the topic. Section B. There are 3 optional topics within this section of the exam paper, and these are relationships, gender, and cognition and development. You will have studied just one of these topics. You should just select one topic from this section and then answer all the questions for your chosen topic. There are 24 marks available, and in the exam you should aim to spend around 30 minutes completing these questions. Discuss the role of the mirror neuron system involved in social cognition. There are 8 marks available for the question. You can see from the mark scheme that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve between 7 and 8 marks, there needs to be an understanding of the role of the mirror neuron system involved in social cognition. This should be evident and well explained, so accurate subject knowledge is needed here, and lots of detail and extending of points need to be made. There also needs to be a discussion of the role of the mirror neuron system involved in social cognition, and this should be strong and in-depth. Discussion here means evaluation. There needs to be a consideration of the strengths and limitations of the mirror neuron system involved in social cognition. The answer needs to be cohesive. There needs to be a clear structure, and technical language needs to be included throughout. Remember that for discussed questions, both AO1 knowledge and AO3 evaluation marks are available. For an 8-mark question like this, there are 3 AO1 marks and 5 AO3. You should consider this in your response because there always needs to be more AO3 material than AO1. Also note in this question that it's not just looking for generic information on the mirror neuron system. It is in context of social cognition, so please make sure that links are made to this throughout the response. Here is a model response. AO1 material will be highlighted in blue, and AO3 material will be highlighted in pink. The mirror neuron system is made up of specialised neurons that are active when an individual performs an action and when they observe someone else performing the same action. Predominantly located in the premotor cortex and inferior parietal lobule, these neurons form a network crucial for social cognition. These allow individuals to mimic behaviours they observe. Their activation contributes to understanding and sharing emotions like empathy and help people see alternative perspectives. They also play a key role in observational learning, allowing individuals to gain knowledge from the actions and experiences of others. They also support the processing of non-verbal cues and gestures and help communication. Evidence supports the role of mirror neurons, linking their activity to behaviours associated with empathy, such as contagious yawning. Haker et al. 2012 found that individuals with higher levels of empathy exhibited stronger activation of mirror neuron systems when observing others yawning, suggesting a direct correlation between mirror neuron activity and empathetic responses. This support strengthens the argument for the significance of mirror neurons in facilitating social understanding and connection. Additionally, the presence of the mirror neuron systems across various animal species suggests a biological foundation for social cognition. Social cognition appears to be exclusive to species that live in complex social communities, with mirror neuron systems identified in primates, elephants, and even dogs. This widespread presence implies an evolutionary advantage to possessing mirror neuron systems, as they contribute to social interaction and understanding which are crucial for survival. However, a limitation of mirror neurons is that they are mainly focused on motor function, which may not fully capture the complexity of higher cognitive processes involved in social interaction. While mirror neurons play a role in understanding and imitating motor actions, they may not cover all aspects of social cognition, which involves perspective taking, theory of mind, and emotional regulation. Therefore, while mirror neurons contribute significantly to social cognition, they may offer a limited perspective on the intricacies of human social behaviour. This response provides a solid discussion of the role of mirror neurons in social cognition and demonstrates a good, thorough understanding of the topic. The response begins by describing the basic function and location of mirror neurons, highlighting their importance in social cognition. They explain how mirror neurons enable individuals to mimic behaviours, understand emotions, and engage in observational learning, while also facilitating non-verbal communication. Clear links to the question and the role of mirror neurons in social cognition have been made through these examples. The answer then moves on from the AO1 material to AO3, which we know forms the most significant part of the response. 3 evaluative paragraphs have been presented. The first 2 providing strengths and the final a limitation. As we've said previously, evaluation does not need to be done in an equal way. There does not need to be the same number of strengths as weaknesses. And for an 8-mark question like this, 3 fully developed evaluative points is absolutely sufficient. It's just the depth of detail that you go into which is the most important factor. Each of the paragraphs uses the point, explain, and consequence structure to get to this required depth. Let's take a look at that second strength. It identifies the strength that there is a presence of the mirror neuron system across various different animals. It explains this in terms of which animals this has been identified in and gives examples of these. The consequence is then given that this widespread presence does seem to imply an evolutionary advantage to possessing mirror neuron systems and that they could be key to our survival. The point, explain, consequence structure leads to a very detailed evaluation point. We see this again, and let's have a look at the final evaluative paragraph. It identifies the limitation that mirror neurons are mainly focused on motor function. That is the clear point. It explains this by saying, whilst it does offer a good explanation of motor functioning, it might not fully address more complicated processes involved in social interaction. Identifies things that may be overlooked, things like perspective taking, theory of mind, and emotional regulation. This shows that the complex nature of social cognition is understood. It gives these clear examples of what is involved. The consequence is then given in the fact that the mirror neuron system may only offer a very limited perspective and explanation of human social behaviour. Technical language has been used throughout the response. Things like the mirror neuron system, the brain areas, the inferior parietal lobule, and these all demonstrate a clear understanding of the subject matter. Discuss Vygotsky's theory of cognitive development. There are 16 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve between 13 and 16 marks, there should be a clear understanding of Vygotsky's theory of cognitive development. This should be evident and well explained. So there needs to be the presentation of very secure, accurate subject knowledge, and this should be well explained, so detail needs to be provided. There should then be a discussion of the theory, and this should be strong and in-depth. Here, discussion means evaluation, a consideration of the strengths and the limitations of the theory. This doesn't need to be done in an equal way. There doesn't need to be the same number of strengths as there are weaknesses. but both do need to be presented and included. The answer should be cohesive, and technical language associated with Vygotsky's theory should be used in an accurate way whenever possible. A discuss question. We know that AO1 knowledge and AO3 evaluation marks will both be available. This corresponds directly with the mark scheme. 6 AO1 knowledge marks will be available, and they contribute towards the understanding of Vygotsky's theory. 10 AO3 marks will be available, and they will be gained for the discussion, the evaluation of Vygotsky's theory. Always consider this when you are planning and writing your response. There should always be much more AO3 material being included than AO1. Here is a model answer. AO1 material will be highlighted in blue, and AO3 material will be highlighted in pink. Vygotsky's theory of cognitive development outlines the role of social interaction in shaping cognitive growth. Learning occurs within a social context through collaborative interactions with more knowledgeable individuals, particularly adults, peers, and teachers. Vygotsky said that language was important for cognitive development, saying it was a tool for communication, but also used as a tool for thought. Language enables children to internalise cultural knowledge and skills, influencing their cognitive processes. He thought cultural context was important for shaping these cognitive processes and recognised cultural variations in learning. Children will learn the things they hear and interact with, and this will differ across cultures. Vygotsky introduced concepts such as the zone of proximal development, the ZPD, the gap between a learner's independent ability and their potential with guidance. He also talked about scaffolding, which is the gradual reduction of support as competence increases. Play is said to be crucial for learning and creativity, and he felt that children use self-talk as a tool for problem solving and internalising information. The ZPD provides a practical framework for understanding the gap between a learner's current abilities and their potential development with the guidance of a more knowledgeable other. This concept has practical implications for education, as it suggests that children can achieve more when working collaboratively with individuals who possess greater knowledge or skills. For instance, Rawazi and Bryant, 1998, conducted a study in which children aged 4 and 5 were asked to guess the number of sweets in a box. Those working with an older child received prompts that led them to more accurate estimates, demonstrating the effectiveness of the ZPD in facilitating learning. However, concepts like the ZPD can be challenging to precisely define and measure. While the ZPD provides a valuable framework, its use in research and practice may vary, leading to inconsistencies. This lack of clarity can limit the theory's use in educational settings. Another limitation is that the theory does not sufficiently address individual differences in learning styles and developmental trajectories. Howe et al. 1992 argued that Vygotsky's emphasis on social interaction may overlook the influence of biological factors and individual differences in cognitive development. This limitation suggests that Vygotsky's theory may not fully capture the complexity of individual learning processes and the diverse way in which children acquire knowledge and skills. Finally, Vygotsky may have placed too much emphasis on social factors, potentially overlooking the role of biological factors in cognitive development, such as genetics and neurological processes. It also ignores differing cognitive abilities and learning styles. Therefore, Vygotsky's theory may benefit from a more integrated approach that considers the interaction between social, biological, and individual factors in cognitive development. The response provides a thorough discussion of Vygotsky's theory of cognitive development, demonstrating a good understanding of its key concepts and implications. It begins by summarising Vygotsky's emphasis on social interaction in shaping cognitive growth, highlighting the importance of language and cultural context in this process. Technical language is also used here in terms of the zone of proximal development, the ZPD, and scaffolding, which reflects a solid grasp of the theory's terminology. Not only does the description outline Vygotsky's theory, but it also offers examples to illustrate its application. It mentions the role of play and the use of self-talk in cognitive development, and this adds depth to the description. It's the detail that's required to reach the highest mark responses. Evaluation is then provided, and we know that this is the AO3 material, which is important in the response. We can see here that 1 strength has been provided and 3 limitations of the theory have been presented. As we said, this is absolutely fine. There does not need to be the same number of strengths and weaknesses. Each of the evaluative points uses the point, explain and consequence structure in order to get into the in-depth evaluation discussion that's needed. We see this clearly in the final paragraph where it presents and deals with a limitation. It clearly identifies a limitation, that the theory may have placed too much emphasis on social factors. It explains this and says that actually things like genetics and neurological processes may not have been considered in the correct way, and that the theory also ignores cognitive abilities and different learning styles. The consequence of this is that the theory may benefit from a more integrated approach that considers these wider factors. Technical language, as we said, has been used throughout the response. Things like the zone of proximal development and scaffolding show a real familiarity with the theory. So overall, the response offers a really comprehensive discussion of Vygotsky's theory, a description, detailed evaluation, and with effective use of technical language. Section C. In this section, there are 3 optional topics: schizophrenia, eating behaviour, and stress. You will have studied just one of these topics. Select the topic that you have studied and then answer all of the questions within that section. There are 24 marks available, and in the exam you should aim to spend around 30 minutes completing the questions. Explain the difference between positive and negative symptoms of schizophrenia. There are 4 marks available for the question. The mark scheme says that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve 3 or 4 marks, the explanation of the 2 concepts, so positive and negative symptoms, should be evident and correct. So there needs to be good subject knowledge, a description of the 2 lots of symptoms, and some explanation of the difference between the 2. The answer should have a clear structure and technical language should be used throughout. Here is the model response. Positive symptoms include things like hallucinations, delusions, and disorganised thinking. They involve the development of abnormal experiences or behaviours. Negative symptoms are different in that they don't include a behaviour developing, but instead the reduction or absence of normal functioning or behaviours. These can include a reduced emotional expression and lack of motivation, avolition. The response effectively addresses the question by clearly distinguishing between positive and negative symptoms of schizophrenia. It provides clear examples of each concept, making it easy to see that there is a good level of understanding and subject knowledge. Firstly, the answer gives a definition and then clear examples of positive symptoms, including hallucinations, delusions, and disorganised thinking. This clarity helps to illustrate how positive symptoms involve the development of abnormal experiences or behaviours, which are characteristic of schizophrenia. Secondly, the response provides a definition and then examples of negative symptoms, so reduced emotional expression and the lack of motivation. It then gives a technical term for this, avolition. By highlighting these symptoms as a reduction or absence of normal functioning, the answer effectively contrasts them with positive symptoms. Other technical language is used in the response, such as hallucinations, delusions, disorganised thinking, and demonstrates a clear understanding of the subject. These terms are commonly used in the clinical context of schizophrenia diagnosis and treatment, and this indicates a good level of expertise. Overall, the answer effectively distinguishes between positive and negative symptoms, provides clear examples and uses appropriate technical language. Briefly evaluate token economies as used in the management of schizophrenia. There are 4 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve 3 or 4 marks, the evaluation of token economies should be thorough and correct. Because this is a briefly evaluate question, 1 strength and 1 limitation would be sufficient, as long as these are fully extended evaluative points. The answer should have a clear structure and be cohesive, so presenting a strength followed by a limitation would be enough to provide this structure. And technical language should be used throughout the response. We should also note from the question that it is asking specifically about the use of token economies in the management of schizophrenia, so this disorder should be referenced in the answer. Here is the example response. There is clear research evidence to show that token economies are effective in the management of schizophrenia. Glowacki et al. 2016 concluded this from a meta-analysis, finding that token economies led to a significant reduction in negative symptoms. This shows that token economies are effective and have real value for the disorder. However, a problem with token economies is that it can be challenging to transfer the learned behaviours to real-world settings from a hospital or treatment setting. This is because behaviours cannot be monitored in the same way, and there will not be the same instant reward with a token. As a result, learned behaviours will not be reinforced, and the individual may not be motivated to continue to behave and act in a more positive way. The response provides a good evaluation of token economies in the management of schizophrenia, and it presents both a strength and a limitation. The strength of token economies is effectively highlighted in the first paragraph. The answer points out that there is clear research evidence supporting the effectiveness of token economies, and it cites Glowacki's meta-analysis findings. By referencing specific research, the response adds credibility to the argument that token economies lead to a significant reduction in negative symptoms. By presenting this finding, there is a clear link to schizophrenia, and it's very specific about the types of symptoms that token economies have shown to be effective for. It finishes the paragraph by explaining that token economies are therefore effective and have been shown to be effective and have real value. This is a clear conclusion. Moving on to the limitation, the response identifies a potential challenge with token economies, the difficulty in transferring the behaviours to real-world settings. The limitation is clearly identified. The limitation is then explained, and where it highlights that the behaviours may not be easily monitored outside of a controlled environment, leading to a lack of reinforcement and motivation. It gives a conclusion that therefore the behaviours may not continue away from this more formal setting. Technical language has been used throughout the response, such as meta-analysis and negative symptoms. This shows a clear understanding of the topic and adds depth to the evaluation. These are terms that are commonly used in psychological research and clinical contexts, indicating a familiarity with the subject matter. A researcher wanted to explore the negative portrayal of schizophrenia in the media. The study systematically analysed a diverse sample of media sources, including news articles, films and television shows. Describe how this content analysis would have been carried out. There are 4 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that to achieve in the top mark band, an understanding of content analysis should be evident and correct. So note that this question is really looking at your knowledge of content analysis as a research method. It also states that application to the situation should be strong and in-depth. So again, revisit the description of the scenario and of the research. It is focused on the negative portrayal of schizophrenia in the media, and therefore this should be referenced consistently throughout your response. There needs to be a clear structure, and technical language should be used whenever possible. Here is the model response. The researchers would have first identified significant categories or themes relevant to the portrayal of schizophrenia in the media. These could include instances of derogatory terms, depictions of violence associated with schizophrenia, or representations of treatment or recovery. This step involves establishing clear criteria for what constitutes each category or theme. Once the categories and themes were established, the researchers would have systematically reviewed or watched a diverse sample of media sources, including news articles, films, and television shows. They would have carefully analysed each piece of media to identify instances that fit into each of the predetermined categories and themes. This step likely involved taking detailed notes or using coding frameworks to categorise the content accurately. As the researchers reviewed the media, they would have quantified and recorded the frequency of each category occurrence. This quantitative data allows for a systematic analysis of the prevalence of different portrayals or representations of schizophrenia in the media. For example, they might have counted the number of times derogatory terms were used or instances of violence associated with schizophrenia. The response effectively addresses the question by providing a clear and systematic overview of how the content analysis would have been conducted to explore the negative portrayal of schizophrenia. Firstly, the answer begins by outlining the process of identifying significant categories. This demonstrates an understanding of the importance of establishing clear criteria to guide the analysis and ensures that the research remains focused and systematic. You can see at this stage, the answer then makes direct reference to schizophrenia. The examples of the categories that could be identified are specific to the disorder. Instances of derogatory terms, depictions of violence, or representations of treatment or recovery. This is a clear and direct application to the scenario. The response then describes how the researchers would systematically review the different types of media sources. By emphasising the need for a comprehensive approach and the careful analysis of each piece of media, it shows an understanding of the thoroughness required in conducting the content analysis. The answer finally explains the importance of quantifying and recording the frequency of each category occurrence. This demonstrates an understanding of the need for quantitative data to support a systematic analysis of the prevalence of different portrayals or representations of schizophrenia. Overall, the response provides a clear and structured explanation of how the content analysis would have been carried out and shows a sound understanding of the research methodology. It uses technical language throughout, such as categories, themes, diverse, systematic analysis, quantitative, and this all adds to the quality of the response. Describe one method that could be used to assess the reliability of the content analysis. There are 4 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that to achieve 3 or 4 marks and to achieve in the top mark band, the understanding of ways of assessing reliability should be evident and well explained. There should be a clear structure to the response and technical language should be used. The answer asks us to describe, so we'll know we'll need to give a thorough overview of a method that would be used in a research context to assess reliability. The question is specific, that it is just looking for one method. This should be identified and then described how that would be carried out. This is a 4-mark question that focuses on just one method, so one point. So it's really wanting to examine your depth of knowledge. So make sure one method is clearly identified and then extend this and provide detail around it. No further marks would be awarded for identifying or describing additional methods. The question is testing knowledge of reliability and not validity. These are often concepts that are confused. Remember that reliability is the consistency of the findings or results from a research study. Here is a model response. One method to assess the reliability of content analysis is through inter-rater reliability. This involves engaging a second individual to collaborate with the primary researcher. Both individuals independently review the media and establish a set of categories, ensuring consensus on operational definitions. They then independently record the occurrences of each category within the media. Finally, the individual tally charts are compared to identify agreements. Typically, researchers acknowledge a correlation of 0.8 between the initial test and the retest to establish reliability. The response effectively addresses the question by outlining a method commonly used to assess the reliability of content analysis. This is inter-rater reliability. The method is clearly identified in the opening sentence. The response then provides a clear step-by-step explanation of how inter-rater reliability is conducted and shows good research methods knowledge. It outlines what the two researchers would do. Both independently review the material and how they would then compare the results. It also explains why this would be done to establish reliability of the results. The mention of the correlation threshold adds depth to the explanation, indicating the level of agreement required for reliability assessment. The language used is technically accurate and precise, and again demonstrates a good research methods knowledge. Terms like operational definitions and individual tally charts demonstrate a grasp of the methodology involved. So overall, the response is concise, informative, and employs appropriate technical language to convey the method effectively. Another appropriate method that could have been used to assess reliability is the test-retest method. Discuss the diathesis stress model of schizophrenia. There are 8 marks available for the question. We know that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve 7 or 8 marks, the understanding of the diathesis stress model of schizophrenia should be evident and well explained. There should then be a discussion or an evaluation of the model, and again this should be strong and in-depth. The answer should be cohesive, it should have a logical structure, and technical language should be used throughout and always in an accurate way. Because this is a discussed question, we know that both AO1 knowledge and AO3 evaluation marks will be available. There will be 3 marks of AO1 and 5 marks of AO3. This corresponds with the mark scheme, the understanding of the model contributing towards AO1 marks, and the discussion of the model contributing towards the AO3 marks. We know our subject knowledge must be about the diathesis stress model, and it needs to be applied to schizophrenia. This is important here because you know that the model can be applied to different behaviours and different disorders, but this question is clearly in the context of schizophrenia. You should consider the marks and how they are split between AO1 and AO3. Because there are 3 AO1 marks and 5 AO3 marks, we know that there should be more AO3 content in the response. For an M-mark question like this, 3 fully extended evaluative points would be sufficient. Here is an example response. AO1 material has been highlighted in blue and AO3 material has been highlighted in pink. The diathesis stress model states that schizophrenia develops from an interaction between inherited genetic predispositions, diathesis, and environmental stresses. Genetic factors, including abnormalities in brain structure or neurotransmitter function, increase susceptibility to the disorder. Adverse events during pregnancy, such as maternal stress or exposure to toxins, may also impact fetal development and contribute to the diathesis. Stresses, such as traumatic events or family dysfunction, act as triggers for schizophrenia. Substance abuse, particularly during vulnerable periods, can further exacerbate the risk. Schizophrenia emerges when the combination of genetic vulnerability and these environmental stresses surpasses an individual's threshold for coping, leading to the manifestation of symptoms characteristic of the disorder. One strength of the diathesis stress model of schizophrenia lies in its supporting evidence, particularly regarding the interaction between genetics and family stress. Tianari et al. 2004 conducted a study which found that families characterised by high levels of hostility and low levels of empathy were more likely to have children who developed schizophrenia. This support adds credibility to the model's idea that environmental stresses, such as family dynamics, can interact with genetic predispositions to increase the risk of schizophrenia. By taking a holistic approach, the explanation considers the interaction between a person's genetic predisposition, the diathesis, and environmental stresses, and shows the importance of considering mental health issues within the broader context of individual experiences and external influences. This holistic perspective aligns with contemporary understandings of mental health, which recognise the complex nature of psychological disorders. However, a limitation of the diathesis stress model is its ambiguity regarding how stressors trigger schizophrenia. While the model says that environmental stressors can interact with genetic vulnerabilities, the specific mechanisms underlying this process remain unclear. Stressors impact individuals in different ways, and not everyone experiencing stressful events will develop schizophrenia. This lack of clarity questions its practical application in clinical settings. The response provides a clear and concise explanation of the diathesis stress model of schizophrenia, outlining its key components and mechanisms. The description, AO1, begins by defining the model, highlighting the interaction between genetic predispositions and environmental stresses in the development of schizophrenia. Technical language is used here, such as diathesis and genetic vulnerabilities, and by using this it demonstrates a solid understanding of the terminology associated with the model. The response offers detailed examples to illustrate the concepts that are discussed. For instance, it mentions specific genetic factors such as abnormalities in brain structure or neurotransmitter function, and then environmental stressors like family dysfunction or substance abuse. The evaluation AO3 material then follows, and each of the evaluative paragraphs follows the structured format of a point, explain, and then consequence. So, for example, in the first evaluative paragraph, it outlines a strength that there is supporting evidence. It goes on to explain then the work of Tianari and the study conducted with families and looking at those family characteristics and how they impact on the development of schizophrenia. The consequence is explained that it adds credibility to the model's ideas and just shows how genetic predispositions can interact with environmental ones. In the second AO3 paragraph, again, it identifies a second strength, the idea that the explanation takes a holistic approach considering all aspects of the person's life. It explains this by talking about the importance of considering mental health issues within a much broader context. It concludes and gives the consequence that this holistic perspective is in line with current understandings of mental health issues and is good at recognising just how complex the disorder might be. In the final paragraph, it outlines a limitation, the fact that the model is ambiguous regarding how stressors actually go on to trigger schizophrenia. It explains this by outlining how individuals will all respond differently to different types of stress, and that not everybody experiencing trauma will go on to develop schizophrenia. The paragraph finishes by giving the consequence of this, that actually practical applications of the model could be limited. By using this same structure across all of the evaluative paragraphs, point, explain, and then consequence, it ensures that the right level of depth and detail is included that will help reach the top mark band. In terms of technical language, the response maintains clarity while using terminology specific to the field of schizophrenia. Complex concepts such as genetic predisposition and environmental stresses are explained in a straightforward way. So overall, the response would achieve in the top mark band because it effectively addresses the question, providing a thorough explanation of the diathesis stress model. It is supported by relevant examples and a thoughtful evaluation. Section C. In this section, there are 3 optional topics: schizophrenia, eating behaviour, and stress. You will have studied just one of these topics. Select the topic that you have studied and then answer all of the questions within that section. There are 24 marks available, and in the exam you should aim to spend around 30 minutes completing the questions. Explain the difference between neophobia and taste aversion. There are 4 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that to achieve in the top mark band, an explanation of the difference between the 2 concepts should be evident and correct. So there needs to be clear subject knowledge presented. Because it is an explain the difference question, we know that definitions need to be given, but there also needs to be some comparison between the 2. The answer should be cohesive and have a clear structure, and technical language should be used whenever possible. Here is the model response. Neophobia involves a fear or avoidance of new or unfamiliar things, such as hesitating to try a novel dish due to the fear of the unknown. Taste aversion is different to this, as it's not about a new food and is instead characterised by associating a specific taste with negative consequence, and this leading to the avoidance of a particular food. This could involve someone avoiding eating a certain dish after it made them ill. The response effectively explains the difference between neophobia and taste aversion by providing clear definitions of each concept and illustrating them with examples. Neophobia is defined as the fear or avoidance of new or unfamiliar things, such as hesitating to try a new dish. Providing examples extend the response and shows a depth of understanding. It is by expanding ideas like this that the answer can move into the top mark band. Taste aversion is then defined as the association of a specific taste with negative consequences, and that this leads to the avoidance of a particular food. Again, this is illustrated with that example of someone avoiding a certain dish after experiencing illness from it. Again, the extension of the definition increases the quality of the response. The response compares the 2 concepts, which we know we said was important because it wants you to explain the difference. And it does this by highlighting their distinct characteristics. Neophobia relates to the fear of a new food, whilst taste aversion involves associating a taste with negative outcomes. Technical language is used in this response, such as a novel dish, specific tastes, as well as the names of the 2 conditions. Overall, the response provides a comprehensive understanding of the difference between neophobia and taste aversion through clear definitions, illustrative examples, and a comparison of their attributes. Briefly evaluate genetic explanations of obesity. There are 4 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that to achieve 3 or 4 marks, the evaluation of genetic explanations of obesity should be thorough and accurate. We know from the question it's a brief evaluation that is being looked for, and so 1 strength and 1 limitation would be appropriate if these were both fully explored and extended. The answer should be cohesive, there should be a clear structure, so again a strength followed by a limitation would ensure that this was the case. Technical language should be used throughout. Let's take a look at the sample answer. 1 strength of genetic explanations of obesity is their potential to identify genes associated with the condition. This could pave the way for the development of successful gene-based therapies to treat obesity. If specific genes responsible for obesity can be identified, researchers can target individuals directly and offer support and preventative methods. These personalised interventions, based on an individual's genetic profile, could lead to more successful outcomes in managing obesity. However, a limitation of genetic explanations is their inability to fully account for the increasing levels of obesity in society. While genetic predispositions can certainly influence an individual's susceptibility to obesity, environmental factors such as diet, physical activity levels, and socioeconomic status must play a significant role. By just focusing on genetic factors, it may overlook the complex interaction between genetic predispositions and environmental influences contributing to the obesity epidemic, and positive changes may not be made. The response provides a good evaluation of genetic explanations of obesity by presenting both a strength and a limitation. This balanced approach allows for a comprehensive assessment of the topic to take place. Each evaluative paragraph follows a clear structure of point, explain, and consequence, enhancing clarity and coherence. By following these 3 steps, it ensures that the right amount of detail and depth is provided in the response. In the first paragraph, the point is made about the potential of genetic explanations to identify genes associated with obesity, followed by an explanation of how this could lead to the development of gene-based therapies. The consequence is then outlined, emphasising the potential for personalised interventions and improved outcomes in managing obesity. Similarly, in the second paragraph, the point is identified that genetic explanations struggle to explain the increasing levels of obesity in society. This is followed by an explanation of how environmental factors could also contribute to the levels of obesity observed, and it gives examples of what these factors may be: physical activity levels, diet, and socioeconomic status. This is a great example of how points are extended and fully explained. The consequence highlights the risk of overlooking these environmental influences and the potential consequences of solely focusing on genetic factors. It comments on how the obesity issues in society will not be improved. Technical language is used effectively throughout the response to convey the concepts clearly. Terms like gene-based therapies, genetic predispositions, and environmental factors are appropriately used to discuss the topic of obesity and its genetic underpinnings. These terms add a real precision to the evaluation and demonstrate a good, strong understanding of the subject matter. So overall, the response does achieve in the top mark band as it effectively evaluates a strength and a limitation, genetic explanations. It employs a clear evaluative structure, the point, explain, and consequence, and uses appropriate technical language. A researcher wanted to explore the negative portrayal of eating disorders in the media. The study systematically analysed a diverse sample of media sources, including news articles, films, and television shows. Describe how this content analysis would have been carried out. And there are 4 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that to achieve 3 or 4 marks, there should be an understanding on content analysis. Be aware then that this question is really examining your knowledge of research methods and how a content analysis is carried out. It also says that there should be application to the scenario, which we know in this case is the negative portrayal of eating disorders. This link should be made clear throughout your response. The answer should be cohesive and technical language should be used whenever possible. Again, remember that this is a research methods question, so consider the research methods terminology that you could include. Here is an example response. The researchers would begin by identifying significant categories or themes relevant to the portrayal of eating disorders in the media. These could include instances of body shaming, glamorisation of unhealthy behaviours, stigmatisation of individuals with eating disorders, or portrayals of extreme thinness as an ideal. This step involves establishing clear criteria for what constitutes each category or theme. Once the categories and themes are established, the researchers would systematically review or watch a diverse sample of media sources, including news articles, films, and television shows. They would carefully analyse each piece of media to identify instances that fit into the predetermined categories and themes. This step likely involves taking detailed notes or using coding frameworks to categorise the content accurately. As the researchers review the media, they would quantify and record the frequency of each category or theme occurrence. This quantitative data allows for a systematic analysis of the prevalence of different portrayals or representations of eating disorders in the media. For example, they might count the number of times derogatory terms were used or instances of glamorization or unhealthy behaviours were depicted. This response offers a comprehensive and structured explanation of how the content analysis of the negative portrayal of eating disorders in the media would have been conducted. The answer starts by outlining the process of identifying significant categories or themes relevant to the portrayal of eating disorders. This is always the first stage of a content analysis. It goes on to provide examples of the categories that may be decided upon. These include body shaming, glamorization of unhealthy behaviours, and stigmatisation of individuals with eating disorders. This makes sure that a clear application to the research scenario has been made. These are categories that would be used within a content analysis looking at eating disorders. The response then describes how the researchers would systematically review a diverse sample of the media sources. And again, this shows an understanding and awareness of the process of a content analysis. The mention of taking detailed notes or using coding frameworks again highlights the meticulous approach that's needed for this sort of research. The answer then emphasises the need to quantify and record the frequency of each category and theme. This demonstrates an understanding of the importance of quantitative data in supporting a systematic analysis. And again, by providing examples such as counting the number of times of derogatory terms that were used, shows how researchers can really measure the prevalence of different portrayals accurately. And again, this offers another link back to the scenario and to the topic of eating disorders. So overall, the response effectively addresses the question by providing a structured and thorough explanation of how content analysis would have been carried out. And it demonstrates a clear understanding of the methodology required to explore the negative portrayal of eating disorders in the media. Describe one method that could be used to assess the reliability of the content analysis. There are 4 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that to achieve 3 or 4 marks and to achieve in the top mark band, the understanding of ways of assessing reliability should be evident and well explained. There should be a clear structure to the response and technical language should be used. The answer asks us to describe, so we'll know we'll need to give a thorough overview of a method that would be used in a research context to assess reliability. The question is specific, that it is just looking for one method. This should be identified and then described how that would be carried out. This is a 4-mark question that focuses on just one method, so one point. So it's really wanting to examine your depth of knowledge. So make sure one method is clearly identified and then extend this and provide detail around it. No further marks would be awarded for identifying or describing additional methods. The question is testing knowledge of reliability and not validity. These are often concepts that are confused. Remember that reliability is the consistency of the findings or results from a research study. Here is a model response. One method to assess the reliability of content analysis is through inter-rater reliability. This involves engaging a second individual to collaborate with the primary researcher. Both individuals independently review the media and establish a set of categories, ensuring consensus on operational definitions. They then independently record the occurrences of each category within the media. Finally, the individual tally charts are compared to identify agreements. Typically, researchers acknowledge a correlation of 0.8 between the initial test and the retest to establish reliability. The response effectively addresses the question by outlining a method commonly used to assess the reliability of content analysis. This is inter-rater reliability. The method is clearly identified in the opening sentence. The response then provides a clear step-by-step explanation of how inter-rater reliability is conducted and shows good research methods knowledge. It outlines what the two researchers would do, both independently review the material and how they would then compare the results. It also explains why this would be done to establish reliability of the results. The mention of the correlation threshold adds depth to the explanation, indicating the level of agreement required for reliability assessment. The language used is technically accurate and precise, and again demonstrates a good research methods knowledge. Terms like operational definitions and individual tally charts demonstrate a grasp of the methodology involved. So overall, the response is concise, informative, and employs appropriate technical language to convey the method effectively. Another appropriate method that could have been used to assess reliability is the test-retest method. Discuss neural mechanisms involved in the control of eating behaviour. There are 8 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve 7 or 8 marks, the understanding of neural mechanisms involved in the control of eating behaviour should be evident and well explained. So this is looking for very secure subject knowledge of those neural mechanisms. It also says that there is a discussion required, so an evaluation of these neural mechanisms, and there needs to be consideration of the strengths and limitations. The answer should be cohesive and technical language should be used whenever possible. Because this is a discuss question, we know that both AO1 knowledge marks and AO3 evaluation marks will be awarded. This corresponds with the mark scheme. AO1 marks will be awarded for the understanding of the neural mechanisms, and AO3 marks will be awarded for the discussion, the evaluation of them. Remind yourself of the amount of marks that are available. For an 8-mark question like this, there will be 3 marks of AO1 and 5 marks of AO3. And this should be reflected in the amount of content that is presented in your response. There should always be more AO3 evaluation and discussion than AO1 knowledge. Make sure that your answer is linked to the control of eating behaviour throughout. Here is a model answer. AO1 material will be highlighted in blue and AO3 material will be highlighted in pink. The hypothalamus plays a role regulating eating behaviour by integrating various signals related to hunger and satiety by monitoring nutrient levels and hormones in the bloodstream. Specifically, the hypothalamus monitors blood glucose levels to assess the body's energy status. When glucose levels decrease, the hypothalamus initiates feeding behaviours to replenish energy stores. The dual centre model of eating behaviour proposes 2 distinct centres within the hypothalamus that regulate eating behaviour. The ventromedial hypothalamus acts as a satiety centre, signalling a feeling of fullness when stimulated, inhibiting further food intake. Lesions in this area may lead to overeating and obesity. Conversely, the lateral hypothalamus functions as a hunger centre, promoting hunger and initiating eating behaviour when stimulated. Lesions in the lateral hypothalamus may result in reduced food intake and weight loss. Lesion studies have provided support for the role of these neural mechanisms. For instance, Hetherington and Ranson 1942 found that lesions in the ventromedial hypothalamus led to overeating, a condition known as hyperphagia, in rats. Similarly, Brobeck 1951 demonstrated that lesions in the lateral hypothalamus resulted in aphasia or reduced food intake. These findings highlight the homeostatic nature of eating behaviour, indicating that specific neural circuits within the brain play a crucial role in regulating hunger and satiety. However, these lesion studies can lack precision and accuracy. Lesions may not only affect the targeted brain area, but also adjacent regions, making it challenging to attribute observed changes in behaviour solely to the manipulated neural structure. Additionally, compensatory mechanisms can obscure the true effect of lesions, complicating their interpretation. This limitation shows a need for complementary approaches, such as neuroimaging, to corroborate findings from lesion studies and provide a more comprehensive understanding of neural mechanisms. These neural mechanisms also fail to account for the influence of cultural, social and environmental factors on eating behaviour. For instance, eating times and dietary preferences are often shaped by cultural practices and societal norms. Woods 2004 emphasises the impact of cultural factors on eating behaviour, highlighting the need to consider broader contextual factors beyond neural mechanisms alone. The response provides a comprehensive discussion of neural mechanisms involved in the control of eating behaviour, particularly focusing on the role of the hypothalamus. It effectively describes how the hypothalamus integrates signals related to hunger and satiety by monitoring nutrient levels and hormones in the bloodstream. This shows a clear understanding of the physiological processes involved in eating. Technical language is used at this stage, such as hypothalamus, blood glucose levels, and homeostatic nature. It's used appropriately and it enhances the quality of the explanation. The response elaborates on the dual centre model of eating, which proposes distinct centres within the hypothalamus responsible for regulating hunger and satiety. By discussing the ventromedial hypothalamus and the lateral hypothalamus, the explanation shows an understanding of how specific neural circuits will influence eating behaviour. After the description, so after presenting the AO1 material, the response then moves on to evaluate and discuss the neural mechanisms, and this is in the form of both strengths and limitations. In the first AO3 paragraph, a clear strength is identified, the fact that supporting evidence exists. It supports this point by citing research in the form of Hetherington and Ronson 1942. The results of this research are clearly outlined. It then gives a conclusion and a consequence of the strength, that the findings highlight the homeostatic nature of eating behaviour and just how the research shows that neural circuits do play a crucial role in eating. The second paragraph identifies a limitation, that lesion studies can lack accuracy. It explains this by talking about how lesions will not only impact one area of the brain, but can also impact adjacent regions. It concludes and gives a consequence of this that actually further approaches and further intervention studies may be needed. In the final paragraph, another limitation is identified, the fact that the explanations do not account and consider the impact of culture. It discusses how different cultures will have different behaviours around eating, and this could be types of food but also times that meals are eaten. Again, it cites research, the Woods 2004 conclusion that cultural factors do have an impact, and that there is a need to consider wider factors and not just focus on neural mechanisms. So overall, the response offers a clear description, AO1, of the neural mechanisms involved in eating behaviour. And then it goes on to evaluate these in the form of strengths and limitations. The key to this answer's success is how each of these evaluative points has been fully extended. The answer uses technical language and uses supportive examples throughout. Section C. In this section, there are 3 optional topics: schizophrenia, eating behaviour, and stress. You will have studied just one of these topics. Select the topic that you have studied and then answer all of the questions within that section. There are 24 marks available, and in the exam you should aim to spend around 30 minutes completing the questions. Explain the difference between type A and type B personality and how this may affect the experience of stress. There are 4 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve 3 or 4 marks, an explanation of the difference between type A and type B personality and how this may affect the experience of stress should be evident and correct. So this is looking for definitions of the 2 types of personality and how they deal with stress. Because it is looking and asking you to explain the difference, you also need to draw some sort of comparison between the 2. The answer should be cohesive, and technical language related to the topic should be used whenever possible. Here is the model response. Type A personalities are characterised by competitiveness and impatience, and often experience higher stress levels due to their constant sense of urgency and multitasking. In contrast, type B personalities are more relaxed and laid back. As a result, they tend to have lower stress levels than those with type A personalities, as they approach tasks with a more easygoing attitude with less emphasis on time pressure. The response effectively addresses the question by clearly describing both type A and type B personalities and providing examples of how each personality type may experience stress. Type A personalities are characterised by traits such as competitiveness and impatience. This gives a clear definition of the personality type. Examples are then provided to illustrate how type A individuals may experience stress in their daily life with a sense of constant urgency. Type B personalities are then described and defined as being more relaxed and laid back. Again, an example is then given of how they will deal and cope with stressful situations. That they have lower stress levels and approach things with a more easygoing attitude. The response compares the experience of stress between the 2 personality types by highlighting their contrasting approaches to tasks and time management, and notes the lower levels of stress experienced by those with type B personality. This ensures the comparison is made and the difference between the 2 explained. Technical language is used throughout the response, such as the type A and type B personalities, multitasking, time pressure, and this effectively shows the characteristics of each of the personality types and their impact on stress. The terms provide a real clarity and precision in discussing the differences between type A and type B personalities. Overall, the response provides a clear and concise explanation, supported by relevant examples and technical language. Briefly evaluate stress inoculation therapy. There are 4 marks available for the question. We can see here from the mark scheme that to achieve 3 or 4 marks, so to achieve in the top mark band, an evaluation of stress inoculation therapy should be thorough and correct. Because this question is asking you to briefly evaluate 1 strength and 1 limitation of the therapy would be sufficient. You should just make sure that each of these evaluative points is fully explored. The answer needs to be cohesive, and technical language should be used whenever possible. Here is an example response. 1 strength of stress inoculation therapy is its applicability to various stresses, including anxiety and trauma. Stress inoculation therapy equips individuals with a range of coping strategies and skills to manage and alleviate stress across different situations. By teaching techniques such as relaxation exercises, cognitive restructuring, and problem-solving skills, stress inoculation therapy empowers individuals to effectively navigate stressful circumstances and build resilience. This versatility allows stress inoculation therapy to address a wide range of stress-related issues, making it a valuable therapeutic approach for individuals experiencing different types of stress. A limitation of stress inoculation therapy is that it may not be suitable for severe mental health disorders. While stress inoculation therapy can be effective in addressing mild to moderate stress and anxiety, its efficacy may be limited when dealing with more severe conditions, such as major depressive disorder or bipolar disorder. In these cases, individuals may require more intensive and specialised interventions such as medication. Relying solely on stress inoculation therapy for severe mental health disorders may not provide adequate support or address underlying symptoms, potentially leading to poor treatment outcomes. The response provides a good evaluation of stress inoculation therapy by presenting both a strength and a limitation, allowing for a balanced assessment of the approach. Each evaluative paragraph follows a clear structure of point, explain, and consequence, enhancing clarity and adding the correct amount of depth to the information. In the first paragraph, the point is made about the strength of stress inoculation therapy, which is its applicability to various stresses. This is followed by an explanation of how the therapy equips individuals with coping strategies and skills. Specific examples of these are given: relaxation exercises, cognitive restructuring, and problem-solving skills. Being this specific helps to extend the response and adds to the quality of the answer overall. The consequence highlights the versatility of stress inoculation therapy in addressing a wide range of stress-related issues, emphasising its value as a therapeutic approach. Similarly, in the second paragraph, a limitation is firstly identified: its potential unsuitability for severe mental health disorders. This is followed by an explanation of how stress inoculation therapy may not be effective in addressing conditions such as major depressive disorder or bipolar disorder. Again, giving these examples shows an understanding of the severity of different conditions and makes the answer worthy of a mark in the top mark band. A consequence is given, and this is the importance of considering alternative or complementary interventions for individuals with these more severe conditions. Using this point, explain, and consequence structure ensures that the points are detailed and discussed with the right depth. This is essential in providing thorough, detailed evaluation. Technical language is used well throughout the response. Terms like coping strategies, resilience, mental health disorders, and efficacy are appropriately used to discuss the approach and its limitations. These terms add precision to the evaluation and demonstrate a strong understanding of the subject matter. Overall, the response effectively evaluates stress inoculation therapy by providing a balanced assessment. It uses a very clear evaluative structure and uses appropriate technical terms. A researcher wanted to explore the negative portrayal of stress in the media. The study systematically analysed a diverse sample of media sources, including news articles, films, and television shows. Describe how this content analysis would have been carried out. There are 4 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme here that to achieve in the top mark band, an understanding of content analysis is evident and correct. You should therefore note that this question is testing your research methods knowledge. It wants to clearly see that you understand how a content analysis would be conducted. It also says that application is strong and in-depth. If you revisit the research outline, it says that this content analysis is focused on the negative portrayal of stress in the media. This is what the response needs to be linked to. Make sure you do this whenever possible. The answer should be cohesive, and technical language should be used whenever possible. Here is an example response. The researchers would begin by identifying significant categories or themes relevant to the portrayal of stress in the media. These could include instances of derogatory language used about those experiencing stress, depictions of violence associated with stress, or stigmatisation of individuals who are suffering from stress. This step involves establishing clear criteria for what constitutes each category or theme. Once the categories and themes are established, the researchers would systematically review or watch a diverse sample of media sources, including news articles, films, and television shows. They would carefully analyse each piece of media to identify instances that fit into the predetermined categories and themes. This step likely involves taking detailed notes or using coding frameworks to categorise the content accurately. As the researchers review the media, they would quantify and record the frequency of each category or theme occurrence. This quantitative data allows for a systematic analysis of the prevalence of different portrayals or representations of stress in the media. For example, they may count the number of times derogatory terms were used or instances of aggression were depicted. This response offers a comprehensive and structured explanation of how the content analysis of the negative portrayal of stress in the media would have been conducted. The answer starts by outlining the process of identifying significant categories or themes relevant to the portrayal of stress. This shows a clear understanding of this early stage of a content analysis. By providing examples such as instances of derogatory language, depictions of violence or stigmatisation, the response is clearly linked to the scenario. These categories would be appropriate when investigating the portrayal of stress in the media. The response then describes how the researchers would systematically review a diverse sample of media sources. This demonstrates an awareness of the importance of analysing a range of media to capture different representations accurately. The mention of taking detailed notes or using coding frameworks highlights the meticulous approach required for the analysis. Finally, the answer emphasises the need to quantify and record the frequency of each category occurrence. This demonstrates an understanding of the importance of quantitative data in supporting a systematic analysis. By providing examples such as counting the number of times derogatory terms were used or instances of aggression, it illustrates how research can measure the prevalence of different portrayals accurately. Again, this provides a clear link back to the research scenario. So overall, this response effectively addresses the question by providing a structured and thorough explanation of how the content analysis would have been carried out. It demonstrates a clear understanding of the methodology required to explore the negative portrayal of stress in the media. Describe one method that could be used to assess the reliability of the content analysis. There are 4 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that to achieve 3 or 4 marks and to achieve in the top mark band, the understanding of ways of assessing reliability should be evident and well explained. There should be a clear structure to the response and technical language should be used. The answer asks us to describe, so we'll need to give a thorough overview of a method that would be used in a research context to assess reliability. The question is specific, that it is just looking for one method. This should be identified and then described how that would be carried out. This is a 4-mark question that focuses on just one method, so one point. So it's really wanting to examine your depth of knowledge. So make sure one method is clearly identified and then extend this and provide detail around it. No further marks would be awarded for identifying or describing additional methods. The question is testing knowledge of reliability and not validity. These are often concepts that are confused. Remember that reliability is the consistency of the findings or results from a research study. Here is a model response. One method to assess the reliability of content analysis is through inter-rater reliability. This involves engaging a second individual to collaborate with the primary researcher. Both individuals independently review the media and establish a set of categories, ensuring consensus on operational definitions. They then independently record the occurrences of each category within the media. Finally, the individual tally charts are compared to identify agreements. Typically, researchers acknowledge a correlation of 0.8 between the initial test and the retest to establish reliability. The response effectively addresses the question by outlining a method commonly used to assess the reliability of content analysis. This is inter-rater reliability. The method is clearly identified in the opening sentence. The response then provides a clear step-by-step explanation of how inter-rater reliability is conducted and shows good research methods knowledge. It outlines what the two researchers would do, both independently review the material and how they would then compare the results. It also explains why this would be done to establish reliability of the results. The mention of the correlation threshold adds depth to the explanation, indicating the level of agreement required for reliability assessment. The language used is technically accurate and precise, and again demonstrates a good research methods knowledge. Terms like operational definitions and individual tally charts demonstrate a grasp of the methodology involved. So overall, the response is concise, informative, and employs appropriate technical language to convey the method effectively. Another appropriate method that could have been used to assess reliability is the test-retest method. Discuss the general adaptation syndrome. There are 8 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme here that an understanding of the general adaptation syndrome should be evident and well explained. There also needs to be a discussion or an evaluation of the general adaptation syndrome, and this should be strong and in-depth. The answer needs to be cohesive, and technical language should be used throughout and always in an accurate and an appropriate way. Because this is a discussed question, we know that both AO1 knowledge and AO3 evaluation marks will be available. There will be 3 AO1 marks and 5 AO3 marks. This corresponds with the points in the mark scheme. The first bullet point, the understanding, addresses and is linked to the AO1 marks. And the AO3 marks, the 5 AO3 marks, link to the second bullet point, the discussion and the evaluation. Pay close attention to the amount of marks that are available for both of these skills. There are 5 AO3 marks available, and therefore this should be reflected in the amount of AO3 material that you include in your response. There should be more AO3 material than AO1. Here is the model response. AO1 material will be highlighted in blue, and AO3 material will be highlighted in pink. The general adaptation syndrome provides a framework for understanding the body's response to stresses. It consists of 3 stages: alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. During the alarm stage, the body experiences an initial response to the stressor, activating the fight or flight response. This involves immediate physiological changes such as increased heart rate and adrenaline release. In the resistance stage, the body attempts to cope with the ongoing stressor, and physiological functions stabilise at an elevated level. Adaptation occurs to deal with the continued stress. However, if the stressor persists, the body enters the exhaustion stage. Resources become depleted, leading to increased susceptibility to illness, fatigue, and physical or mental breakdown. There is supporting evidence demonstrating a consistent reaction to stresses regardless of their nature. Sale's 1936 study, which exposed rats to various stresses, such as extreme temperatures and surgical injuries, found that they consistently exhibited similar physiological responses. This consistency suggests a universal pattern of adaptation to stress, enhancing the validity and generalizability of the general adaptation syndrome model. However, the model may oversimplify the complexity of stress responses. While it identifies 3 stages, real-life stressors lead to a range of responses that cannot be neatly categorised. The model fails to capture the individual variability and contextual factors that influence how individuals perceive and respond to stress, thereby limiting its applicability. Additionally, the model fails to account for the wide variation in stress responses among individuals. Mason 1995 noted that individuals may exhibit vastly different physiological and psychological reactions to the same stressor. Factors such as genetics, past experiences, coping mechanisms, and social support networks can significantly influence how individuals respond to stress. The response offers a concise but comprehensive explanation of the general adaptation syndrome, outlining its 3 stages and the physiological responses associated with each stage. Technical language such as alarm, resistance, exhaustion is used appropriately, enhancing the clarity of the explanation. Additionally, specific examples are provided to illustrate each stage, such as the activation of the fight or flight response during the alarm stage, and the depletion of resources leading to increased susceptibility to illness during the exhaustion stage. These examples help contextualise the theoretical framework of general adaptation syndrome. The response then goes on to present AO3 evaluation material. We can see in the first evaluative paragraph that a strength is identified, the fact that there is supporting evidence. The point is made. This is then explained by citing sales research with rats and how these rats consistently showed similar physiological responses when they experienced stress. Detail is provided about the study and examples of those stresses are provided: extreme temperatures and surgical injuries. The paragraph closes with a consequence, acknowledging that there does seem to be a universal pattern of adaptation to stress. In the second evaluative paragraph, a limitation is identified: the fact that general adaptation syndrome may oversimplify stress. This is explained by saying that real-life stressful situations may not fit neatly into the 3 stages. The consequence is then given by saying that the model may not be able to be applied in a range of different situations. In the final paragraph, a second limitation is identified: that there are individual differences in stress response. Mason's research in 1995 is cited, and it explains how individuals will have very different physiological and psychological reactions to the same stressor. It concludes by suggesting other additional factors that may need to be considered to give a full account of individual differences and responses to stress. It gives examples of these as genetics, past experiences, coping mechanisms, and individual support network. Technical language is used throughout the response: the fight or flight response, physiological changes, increased susceptibility, universal patterns, and validity and generalisability, and these further add to the quality of the response. Section D. Within this section of the paper, there are 3 optional topics: aggression, forensic psychology, and addiction. You will have studied just one of these topics, so choose the topic that you have studied. Answer all of the questions for your chosen topic. There are 24 marks available, and in the exam you should aim to spend around 30 minutes on this section. Match each summary from Table 1 with the most appropriate term from Table 2. For these questions, you should carefully read each of the summaries in Table 1. Make sure you have understood the information. For each one, you then need to look at Table 2 and decide which of the terms it best matches to. In your response space, you need to give a letter, A, B, C or D, and then match this with the most appropriate term. For this question, A matches with natural selection, B matches with innate releasing mechanism, C matches with fixed action pattern, and D matches with ethology. Let's examine each pairing. A. Natural selection. This summary perfectly describes the process of natural selection, which is the mechanism proposed by Charles Darwin to explain how heritable traits that offer advantages for survival and reproduction become more common in a population over generations, leading to the adaptation of species to their environment. Therefore, the correct answer is A. B. Innate releasing mechanism. This term refers to a structure in an organism's brain that responds to a specific key stimulus, triggering a stereotypical and instinctive behaviour or response. The summary matches this description closely, making it the correct pairing. C. Fixed action pattern. The summary describes an innate and stereotypical sequence of behaviours triggered by a specific stimulus, typically observed in animals and performed without learning. This perfectly aligns with the concept of a fixed action pattern, making this pairing correct. And D. Ethology. The summary describes the scientific study of animal behaviour in their natural habitats, focusing on observing and understanding patterns of behaviour, communication, and interactions within and between species. This aligns with the definition of ethology, making this pairing correct too. If we analyse the remaining option, neurons, this term does not match with any of the summaries provided in Table 1. Neurons are the basic building blocks of the nervous system and are not directly related to the descriptions provided in the summaries. Therefore, this option is incorrect. Outline one strength and one limitation of ethological explanations of human aggression. There are 4 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme here that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve 3 or 4 marks, our evaluation of the explanations needs to be thorough and correct. Because the question is asking for one strength and one limitation, in order to make it thorough, they should be well structured and fully developed. The answer needs to be cohesive, and technical language should be used throughout the response and always in an accurate and an appropriate way. So let's revisit the question again. So outline one strength and one limitation. It makes it very clear the evaluative points that need to be included in the response. So make sure it is just that, one strength and one limitation. But as we said, as the mark scheme says, to make this thorough, make sure they are fully developed. And as we've done in previous questions, we'll use a point, explain, consequence structure for this. The other thing to note from the question is that it's looking for a strength and a limitation of ethological explanations of human aggression. Therefore, this is not looking for generic evaluation, but specifically the strengths and limitations of the explanations in explaining human aggression. A link to this needs to be made in both the strength and the limitation. Here is the model response. One strength of ethological explanations of human aggression is their emphasis on studying observable behaviour in natural settings. Ethologists focus on observing aggressive behaviours in their natural contexts, allowing for the collection of detailed and objective data on aggressive interactions among humans. By studying behaviours as they occur in real-life situations, researchers can gain insights into the triggers, patterns and consequences of aggression, and this enhances the validity and reliability of their findings. The emphasis on empirical observation enhances the scientific rigour of ethological explanations of human aggression, making them valuable for understanding aggressive behaviour. A limitation of ethological explanations is that they may not adequately address the significant impact of cultural and environmental factors on aggressive behaviour. They may overlook ways in which cultural norms, socialisation and the environment shape aggressive tendencies in humans. For example, research by Hunt, 1973, suggests that fixed action patterns can be influenced by environmental factors and individual experiences. This limitation suggests that ethological explanations may not provide a comprehensive understanding of human aggression, as they may fail to account for the complex interaction between biological, cultural, and environmental influences. The response provides a strong evaluation of ethological explanations of human aggression by presenting both a strength and a limitation, allowing for a balanced evaluation. Each evaluative paragraph follows a clear structure of point, explain, and consequence. And we said this was really key in a question like this that is focused and requires fully developed evaluation points. In the first paragraph, the point is made about the strength of ethological explanations, which is their emphasis on studying observable behaviour in natural settings. This is followed by an explanation of how this approach allows for the collection of detailed and objective data on aggressive interactions. And then the consequence highlights the enhanced validity and reliability of findings, illustrating the value of the explanations in understanding aggression. Links to aggression have been made throughout. Similarly, in the second paragraph, the point is raised regarding the limitation of ethological explanations, which is their potential failure to adequately address the impact of cultural and environmental factors. This is followed by an explanation of how they may overlook the influence of cultural norms and socialisation processes. The consequence looks at the potential incompleteness of the explanations, particularly in failing to account for the complex interaction between biological, cultural and environmental influences. And again, links to aggression have been made throughout. Technical language has been used effectively in the response. Terms like observable behaviour, validity and reliability, cultural norms and socialisation are appropriately used to discuss the topic. The terms add precision to the evaluation and demonstrate a strong understanding of the subject. Overall, the response effectively evaluates the ethological explanations of human aggression by providing one strength and one limitation, and by using appropriate technical language. Discuss explanations of institutional aggression in the context of prisons. There are 16 marks available for the question. Looking at the mark scheme, we can see that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve between 13 and 16 marks, an understanding of explanations of institutional aggression needs to be evident and well explained. So this is the subject knowledge, this is information, a description of the explanations of institutional aggression. The second point says that there should be a discussion of these explanations, so this means there needs to be an evaluation. This needs to be strong and in-depth. The answer should be cohesive and technical language should be used throughout. If we consider further the fact that this is a discuss question, we know that both AO1 knowledge and AO3 evaluation marks will be available, and this corresponds with the first 2 bullet points in the mark scheme. AO1 marks will be awarded for the understanding of the explanation, and AO3 marks will be awarded for its discussion. There will be 6 AO1 marks available, and there will be 10 AO3 marks available. You should consider this in your response and make sure that there is more AO3 material presented. The final thing to note is that the question is in the context of prisons, and therefore application of the information to prisons should be made throughout the response. Here is a model response. AO1 material will be highlighted in blue, and AO3 material will be highlighted in pink. Dispositional explanations attribute behaviour to internal characteristics of an individual. One prominent dispositional explanation is the importation model proposed by Irwin and Cressy. This says that the backgrounds of inmates play a role in shaping aggression within prisons. The model suggests that individuals maintain their identities from the outside world. Research by Thomas and McManaman, 2005, supports this, indicating that individuals are more likely to be involved in violence if it was part of their life outside of prison. It highlights the existence of various prison subcultures, such as criminal, thief, or convict, and suggests that pre-existing values, norms, and behaviours brought into the prison setting contribute to the overall institutional culture. A strength of dispositional explanations of aggression in prisons is their idiographic nature, which considers the experiences and characteristics of each individual. This approach looks at the unique factors contributing to aggression, such as personal histories, psychological traits, and social backgrounds. Dispositional explanations can therefore offer tailored interventions and support strategies to address the specific needs of inmates, leading to more effective management of aggression. However, there is conflicting evidence regarding their effectiveness in different populations. While dispositional factors may be effective at explaining behaviour in young people, they may be less effective at explaining aggression in adults. Research by Poole and Rogoli, 1983, suggests that dispositional explanations may not adequately account for the complex interplay of factors contributing to aggression among adult inmates. This inconsistency in findings undermines the generalisability and applicability of the explanations across different age groups and prison settings. Situational explanations focus on environmental factors. The deprivation model proposed by Clemmer, 1958, highlights the impact of various deprivations experienced by inmates within the prison environment, such as the deprivation of autonomy, goods and services, and relationships. It says that aggression occurs due to unmet psychological, social, and material needs. Overcrowding and a lack of privacy can also cause aggression. Aggression can act as a coping mechanism for dealing with the negative effects of deprivation, and it is considered a response to the strain caused by these limitations. A strength of situational explanations is their alignment with the frustration-aggression hypothesis. According to this hypothesis, proposed by Cheeseman, 2003, aggression arises from frustration when individuals are prevented from achieving their goals. In the prison context, inmates may experience frustration due to factors such as overcrowding and limited resources. They may resort to aggressive behaviour as a means of coping with their frustration. This explanation offers valuable insight into the psychological mechanisms underlying aggression in prisons. The explanation is also supported by Maslow's hierarchy of needs, particularly the recognition that unmet physiological needs can contribute to aggression. Individuals will prioritise fulfilling basic physiological needs such as food, water, and shelter before addressing higher order needs such as safety and belongingness. Inmates may experience deprivation of these needs due to inadequate nutrition and poor living conditions. Individuals may become more prone to aggression as they seek to satisfy their basic survival requirements. This shows the importance of addressing inmates' basic needs to reduce violence and promote a safer prison environment. The response provides a thorough discussion of explanations of institutional aggression in the context of prisons, and it covers both dispositional and situational factors. Considering two different explanations is appropriate in a 16-mark question like this. Dispositional explanations are first described within the presentation of AO1 material. This includes information on the importation model, and these are described in detail, highlighting how the backgrounds and characteristics of inmates shape aggression within prisons. Examples such as research by Thomas and McManaman, 2005, are provided to support the importation model and to explain this further. And this demonstrates how individual experiences influence aggressive behaviour. After this initial AO1 paragraph explaining dispositional explanations, the response then evaluates them straight away. 2 AO3 evaluative paragraphs are presented. And both of these paragraphs use the point, explain, consequence structure in order to get the required depth of explanation. The first paragraph identifies a strength. The fact that dispositional explanations take an idiographic approach to their explanations, continuing all aspects of an individual. These are explained by identifying elements and characteristics of inmates that would be considered, personal histories, psychological traits, and social backgrounds. Including examples is a great way to extend a response and to really make sure that it's been fully explained. The conclusion is given that therefore strategies can be personalised to manage and treat aggression. In the second evaluative paragraph here, an limitation is first identified, the point is made that there is conflicting evidence. This is explained by presenting supporting research, and the conclusion is given that these inconsistent findings can undermine the generalisability of the research. The consequence is clearly outlined. You can then see that the response returns to AO1 and explains situational explanations. And again, this is done in detail. And research findings have been presented to help explain what these situational explanations are. They give very clear examples relating to prison environments: deprivation of autonomy, deprivation of relationships, overcrowding and a lack of privacy. It is linked and applied to prisons throughout. We then return to AO3 material again, and again a strength and a limitation has been identified. So in the first evaluative paragraph here for situational experiences, it says, and the point is made, that they are in alignment with the frustration-aggression hypothesis, so there is supporting research. It's explained again through the use and citation of research, Cheeseman 2003. Consequence is then given that these situational explanations are of value and provide a real insight into aggressive behaviour. For the second evaluative point, a second strength is identified: the fact that the idea is supported by Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is explained well, and clear detail of this hierarchy has been included around physiological needs being able to be met before the person can consider wider needs such as safety and belongingness. This is then clearly linked to inmates and their experience and what they may not have available to them in prison: nutrition and quality living conditions. Evaluation paragraph finishes by saying how this shows the importance of making sure that basic needs are met. Technical language has been used throughout. We talk about the ideographic approach, conflicting evidence, the frustration-aggression hypothesis, and this demonstrates a really sophisticated understanding of the topic. So overall, the response gives a thorough and well-explained outline of both dispositional and situational explanations, and both of these are discussed, they are evaluated with strengths and limitations given. Every one of the evaluative paragraphs is fully developed, a clear point. It's explained often through the use of supporting evidence and research, and consequences and implications are given. Technical language has been used throughout, and this ensures that the response gains a mark in the top mark band. Section D. Within this section of the paper, there are 3 optional topics: aggression, forensic psychology, and addiction. You will have studied just one of these topics, so choose the topic that you have studied. Answer all of the questions for your chosen topic. There are 24 marks available, and in the exam you should aim to spend around 30 minutes on this section. Match each summary from Table 3 with the most appropriate term from Table 4. For questions like this, you should firstly make sure that you carefully read all of the information the summary is presented in Table 3. Make sure that you fully understand that information. You then need to go to Table 4 and see which of the key terms the summary is matched to. In your answer space, you need to provide a letter, A, B, C or D, and match this with the correct term. For this question, A is extroversion, B is neuroticism, C is criminal personality, and D is socialisation. A, extroversion. This term aligns well with the summary provided, which describes a personality trait characterised by sociability, outgoing behaviour, and a preference for engaging with the external world. Extroversion is indeed associated with these characteristics, making this pairing correct. B, neuroticism. The summary describes a personality trait characterised by emotional instability, anxiety, and a tendency to experience negative emotions. Neuroticism is a psychological trait that encompasses these features, such as anxiety and emotional instability, and this makes the pairing correct. C. Criminal personality. The summary describes specific traits predisposing individuals to engage in criminal behaviour. This aligns with the concept of a criminal personality, which refers to a set of personality traits or characteristics associated with an increased likelihood of engaging in criminal behaviour. Therefore, this pairing is correct. D. Socialisation. The summary describes the process by which individuals acquire the norms, values, and behaviours of their society or culture. This process is indeed known as socialisation, where individuals learn and internalise societal norms and values through various social interactions and experiences. This makes this pairing correct too. The remaining option, psychoticism, this term does not align with any of the provided summaries in Table 3. Psychoticism is a personality trait associated with aggression, impulsivity, and antisocial behaviour, but it doesn't directly relate to the descriptions provided in the summaries. Therefore, this option is incorrect. Outline one strength and one limitation of Einsink's theory of criminal personality. There are 4 marks available for the question. We can see from the mark scheme that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve 3 or 4 marks, evaluation of the theory should be thorough and correct. When we are evaluating, the points need to be fully extended, especially in questions like this, where it is specifically just looking for one strength and one limitation. Depth needs to be given in order to ensure the full 4 marks can be awarded. The answer says that it should be cohesive, so there needs to be a clear structure, things need to be presented in a logical way, and technical language should be used whenever possible. So again, just recap the question. Outline one strength and one limitation. That offers a very clear structure. And make sure that each of the points are fully developed. Here is the sample response. One strength of Einsink's theory of criminal personality is evidence that has been found to support it. For instance, Einsink and Einsink 1977 used a personality questionnaire to test 2,070 prisoners. They found that prisoners scored higher on measures of psychoticism, neuroticism, and extroversion compared to control participants. This supports Einsink's theory, suggesting that there may be a meaningful association between specific personality traits and criminal behaviour. However, a limitation of Einsink's theory is its inability to establish a clear causal relationship between personality traits and criminal behaviour. While Einsink's theory suggests a correlation, it does not definitely prove that these traits cause individuals to engage in criminal activities. There are individuals who score highly for the same personality traits that do not go on to display criminal behaviour. This limitation suggests that while there may be associations between personality traits and criminal behaviour, other factors such as the environment or individual circumstances may also play a role in shaping this behaviour. The response provides a strong evaluation of Einsink's theory of criminal personality by presenting both a strength and a limitation, meeting the demands of the question. Each evaluative paragraph has been fully extended using the point, explain and consequence structure. In the first paragraph, the point is made about the strength of Einsink's theory, which is supported by empirical research. An explanation follows this of how Einsink and Einsink 1977 found that prisoners scored higher on measures of certain personality traits when compared to control participants. As we've said before, citing research evidence is a good way to explain an evaluative point. The consequence emphasises how this support bolsters the validity of Einsink's theory and contributes to a better understanding of criminal personality. In the second paragraph, the point is raised regarding the limitation of Einsink's theory, which is its inability to establish a clear causal relationship between personality and criminal behaviour. The explanation then follows of how, while the theory suggests correlations between personality traits and criminal behaviour, it does not definitely prove causality. The consequence highlights how this limitation may restrict the power of Einsink's theory and suggests that there is a need for further research to confirm the link between personality and criminality. Technical language is used effectively throughout the response. This includes terms like personality traits, empirical evidence, correlation, and causal relationship. They are appropriately used, and it helps to show a strong understanding of the subject matter. So overall, the response effectively evaluates one strength and one limitation of Einsink's theory of criminal personality. It gives a balanced evaluation, it uses a clear evaluative structure, and uses appropriate technical language. Discuss behaviour modification in custody as a way of dealing with offending behaviour. There are 16 marks available for the question. If we look at the mark scheme here, we can see that to achieve the top mark band, an understanding of behaviour modification used in custody should be evident and well explained. So this is looking for good, detailed, accurate subject knowledge. It then says that the discussion of behaviour modification should be strong and in-depth. So discussion means the evaluation. These points need to be fully explained in order to meet that in-depth criteria. The answer should have a clear structure and be cohesive, and technical language should be used whenever possible. If we consider the discuss element of the question, we know that AO1 knowledge and AO3 evaluation marks will be available. This corresponds with the 2 bullet points in the mark scheme. AO1 marks available for the understanding of behaviour modification, and AO3 marks being awarded for the discussion. There will be 6 marks of AO1 and 10 marks of AO3. You should always consider this with the amount of material that you present. You should always have more AO3 material than AO1. Also note the end of the question, behaviour modification used to deal with offending behaviour. So clear links need to be made to criminal behaviour throughout. Here is a model response. AO1 material will be highlighted in blue and AO3 material will be highlighted in pink. Token economy is a behaviour modification system that uses tokens as a form of reinforcement or reward for desired behaviours, operant conditioning. Physical or digital tokens are given as rewards for positive behaviours. These tokens hold no intrinsic value but can be exchanged for desired rewards. Specific behaviours are identified as targets for modification. These can include cooperation, compliance with rules, participation in therapy, or educational programmes. The system relies on consistency and transparency in distribution and exchange. It's important that it is clear what the tokens will be awarded for. Individuals can exchange their earned tokens for various privileges such as additional recreation time, access to certain activities, or personal items, primary reinforcers. Tokens are secondary reinforcers with their value coming from the association with the reward. Tokens and privileges can be removed when undesired behaviour is shown, punishment. As individuals experience success through token reinforcement, there is an expectation that positive behaviours will generalise to various aspects of their life after their release. Token economy programmes have been shown to be very effective, particularly among young offenders. Hobbs and Holt 1976 introduced a token economy system in a US correctional institution and monitored the impact over 14 months. There was a significant improvement in behaviour in the experimental group which was not recorded in the control group. This indicates that such interventions can be beneficial in reducing recidivism rates and promoting pro-social behaviour. Programmes like this are relatively simple and inexpensive to action and require minimal training for staff members. They can be much cheaper than other methods like counselling and anger management support. Once they have been set up, all members of staff can easily use the system. This shows how they could be very beneficial within prison settings, as for a relatively low investment, the impact can be significant. However, despite their initial effectiveness, token economy programmes may exhibit limited long-term impact, as noted by Rice 1990. Short-term behavioural changes can be made, but their effects may not persist over time. There's a risk that individuals may become over-reliant on external rewards, such as the tokens, rather than internalising the desired behaviours. This reliance on external reinforcement may hinder the development of intrinsic motivation, leading to challenges in sustaining positive behavioural changes beyond the prison environment. Individuals participating in token economy programs can sometimes resist the system, perceiving it as infantile or patronising. This resistance can lead to feelings of frustration and resentment, undermining its effectiveness and potentially reducing engagement and cooperation. If individuals perceive the token economy as arbitrary or unfair, it may further increase negative attitudes and resistance towards the programme, diminishing its overall effectiveness in addressing offending behaviour. The answer provides a comprehensive overview of how token economy, a behaviour modification system, is used in dealing with offending behaviour in custody settings. It firstly explains the fundamental principles of a token economy system, such as the use of tokens as reinforcements for desired behaviours and the exchange of tokens for privileges. Additionally, the answer offers a clear explanation of how specific behaviours are targeted for modification within the token economy system, highlighting its reliance on consistency and transparency. This AO1 description gives specific examples of the types of behaviours that may be rewarded: cooperation, compliance with rules, participation in therapy and rehabilitation programmes. This helps to really apply the information to the custody and criminal behaviour context. It also gives clear examples of the type of rewards that may be given: additional recreation time, access to certain activities, or additional personal items. By adding these examples into the description, it shows a very secure subject knowledge and makes sure that the understanding is well explained. After this description and presentation of the AO1 knowledge, the response then moves on to evaluate the behaviour modification systems and to evaluate token economy use. We can see this here with 4 evaluative paragraphs, 2 strengths followed by 2 limitations. Note that evaluation does not always need to be equal in this way. There doesn't always need to be the same number of strengths as the same number of limitations. As long as both have been included, that is absolutely fine. Important thing with evaluative points is just to make sure that they are all fully extended and applied to the question. We can see this in the first evaluative paragraph. It gives the point, it identifies what the strength is, that programmes have been shown to be effective. It explains this then by citing the research of Hobbs and Holt in 1976, and detailed information about this is provided, that it was done in a US correctional institution and monitored over 14 months. The findings are also given. The key then is the consequence, and this is the final sentence in that paragraph that indicates that the interventions could be beneficial, contribute to reducing reoffending rates, and increasing the likelihood of pro-social behaviour. This is the clear link back to the question. A second strength is presented, the fact that the programmes are relatively simple and straightforward to implement. It explains this by saying that they would therefore be cheaper than other alternative programmes, and the consequence is that therefore they could be very beneficial with a relatively low investment. A limitation is then identified, and the point made that even though they may be initially effective, long-term impact could be limited. It is explained that there is a risk that the individuals may become over-reliant on the rewards, on the tokens, and the consequence is that these same changes may not be seen and sustained beyond the prison environment. The final limitation is identified, that actually some individuals will resist the system and will refuse to take part. This is explained by saying that they may feel frustration and resentment, and as a result there could be negative attitudes about the programmes and their overall effectiveness could be reduced. Technical language is used throughout the response, such as operant conditioning, primary reinforcers, intrinsic motivation, and this demonstrates a good understanding of behavioural principles. Overall, the response effectively discusses behaviour modification used in custody settings by using token economy. It provides a well-rounded discussion and evaluation with strengths and limitations, and technical language has been used throughout. Section D. Within this section of the paper, there are 3 optional topics: aggression, forensic psychology, and addiction. You will have studied just one of these topics, So choose the topic that you have studied. Answer all of the questions for your chosen topic. There are 24 marks available, and in the exam you should aim to spend around 30 minutes on this section. Match each summary from Table 5 with the most appropriate term from Table 6. For questions like this, the most important thing for you to do is make sure that you have read through the information in Table 5 that includes an outline of the summaries. Make sure that you fully understand this information. You should then go to Table 6 and decide which of the key terms is best described by each of the summaries. In your answer space, you should firstly give a letter, A, B, C or D, and match this with the most appropriate term. For this question, A is gambler's fallacy, B is cognitive bias, C is probability, and D is self-efficacy. So A, gambler's fallacy. The summary describes the mistaken belief that the future outcomes of a random event are influenced by past outcomes, leading to incorrect predictions. This aligns perfectly with the concept of the gambler's fallacy, where individuals incorrectly believe that the past outcomes of a random event influence future outcomes, such as in a gambling scenario. This pairing is therefore correct. B, cognitive bias. The summary describes systematic patterns of deviation from norm or rationality in judgment, often influenced by mental shortcuts or emotional factors. This clearly aligns with the concept of cognitive bias, where individuals consistently make irrational judgments due to inherent cognitive limitations or emotional influences. This makes the pairing correct. C, probability. The summary describes a measure of the likelihood or chance that an event will occur. Probability refers to the likelihood of an event occurring, which aligns perfectly with this description, making this pairing correct. And then D, self-efficacy. The summary describes the belief in one's ability to successfully perform specific tasks and achieve goals. This aligns with the concept of self-efficacy, which is a person's belief in their own capability to execute courses of action required to manage prospective situations. Again, this makes this final pairing correct. Introspection. This term does not align with any of the provided summaries in Table 5. Introspection refers to the examination of someone's own conscious thoughts and feelings, and it doesn't directly relate to the descriptions provided in the summaries. Therefore, this option is incorrect and does not match with any of the key terms. Outline one strength and one limitation of cognitive theory of gambling addiction. There are 4 marks available for the question. The mark scheme says that to achieve in the top mark band, so to achieve 3 or 4 marks, evaluation of cognitive theory should be thorough and correct. Looking at the question, it asks for one strength and one limitation. This is important to note. In order to make sure that the response is thorough, the strength and limitation should both be fully explored. The answer needs to be cohesive, there needs to be a clear structure, and technical language should be used whenever possible. Again, look at the question. It's not just looking for a strength and limitation of cognitive theory or around cognitive psychology. It is looking for a limitation and a strength of the theory explaining gambling addiction. Links to gambling behaviour should be made throughout. Here is a model response. One strength of the cognitive theory of gambling addiction is the supporting evidence. For instance, McCusker and Gettings, 1997, conducted a study using a Stroop task, where participants had to identify the colour words were printed in, which were different from what the word said. They found that when the printed word was associated with gambling, individuals with a gambling addiction took longer to respond. This demonstrates a cognitive bias towards information related to gambling, supporting the cognitive theory's idea that cognitive processes play a significant role in the development and maintenance of gambling addiction. A limitation of the cognitive theory is its failure to account for unique factors contributing to gambling addiction in different people. While the theory acknowledges the role of individual differences such as personality traits and cognitive biases, it may not fully capture the complexity of gambling addiction across various populations. Factors such as socioeconomic status, environmental stresses, and co-occurring mental health disorders may also contribute to the development of addiction in ways that are not adequately addressed by the cognitive theory. The response provides a strong evaluation of the cognitive theory of gambling by presenting both a strength and a limitation. This addresses demands of the question. Each evaluative paragraph follows a clear structure of the point, explain, and consequences, and this enhances the clarity and coherence of the response. In the first paragraph, the point is made about the strength of the cognitive theory, which is supported by empirical evidence. This is followed by an explanation of how McCusker and Getting's 1997 found that individuals with a gambling addiction demonstrated a cognitive bias towards gambling-related information. The consequence emphasises how this empirical support bolsters the validity of the cognitive theory and contributes towards a better understanding of gambling addiction. Similarly, in the second paragraph, the point is raised regarding the limitation of the cognitive theory, which is its potential failure to account for diverse individual factors contributing to behaviour. The explanation follows and explains how the theory may not fully capture the complexity of behaviours across different populations. The consequence considers how this limitation may restrict the explanatory power and practical applicability of cognitive theory, particularly in developing interventions. Technical language is used well throughout the response. Terms like cognitive theory, cognitive bias, empirical evidence, individual differences, socioeconomic status, co-occurring mental health disorders. These are all appropriately used to discuss the subject. These terms add precision to the evaluation and demonstrate a strong understanding of the subject matter. So overall, the response effectively evaluates, discusses the cognitive theory of gambling addiction by providing a balanced assessment, employing a clear evaluative structure and using appropriate technical language. Discuss Prochaska's 6-stage model of behaviour changes as a theory of addictive behaviour. There are 16 marks available for the question. The mark scheme says that to achieve in the top mark band, there should be an understanding of Prochaska's 6-stage model, and this should be evident and well explained. There also needs to be a discussion of the model, and this should be strong and in depth. Discussion here means evaluation, strengths and limitations. The response should be cohesive, there should be a clear structure, and technical language should be used consistently throughout the response and in an accurate way. Remember, for discuss questions, it means that both AO1 knowledge and AO3 evaluation marks will be available. This corresponds with the first 2 bullet points in the mark scheme. The understanding of the model will gain AO1 marks, and the discussion of the model will gain AO3 marks. There will be 6 AO1 marks available, and there will be 10 AO3 marks available. You should always remember this and consider this with the amount of information that you present. There should always be more AO3 material than AO1. Finally, note from the question that Prochaska's 6-stage model needs to be discussed in the context of addictive behaviour. Links to addiction should be made throughout. Here is a model response. AO1 material will be highlighted in blue and AO3 material will be highlighted in pink. Prochaska's 6-stage model of behaviour change offers a structured framework that explains the phases individuals will go through when modifying their behaviour. This model says that behaviour change is a gradual process and has distinct stages that individuals may not always progress through linearly. It acknowledges the chance of relapse, where individuals may regress to earlier stages before achieving lasting change. This recognition of potential relapse is a key strength of the model. By recognising that behaviour change is a dynamic process, it gives people realistic expectations. This is important when tackling addiction, as it is common for people to face difficulties when trying to change. Acknowledging this tells people that it is expected and that they're in no way unusual. This can make them more invested in change and their changes ultimately more successful. The perceived benefits of change are important, needing to outweigh the perceived costs for progression through the stages. Individuals having confidence in their ability to change is said to be essential for success. The model outlines 6 stages: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance and termination. In pre-contemplation, individuals lack awareness or deny their addiction and any need for change. Contemplation follows with acknowledgement of the need for change, but without full commitment. Preparation signifies the intention to act, possibly with initial steps towards change being taken. Action involves actively modifying behaviour, leading to observable changes. Maintenance includes sustaining these changes over time and working to prevent any sort of relapse and a return to their addictive behaviour. Termination is the successful integration of the new behaviour into their lifestyle, accompanied by a lack of temptation to revert to old habits. A strength of Prochaska's behaviour change model lies in its versatility, as it can be applied to various addictive behaviours. It can be adapted to suit different contexts and populations, making it applicable across various settings, such as clinical practice and community interventions. This enhances the model's utility and relevance, and it will empower practitioners and individuals to tailor interventions to specific needs and circumstances. Its effectiveness has been shown and supporting evidence exists. Parker and Parikh 2001 measured its effectiveness in healthcare settings. They concluded that the framework supported the planning of treatment programmes and led to their success. This shows the value of the model and how it can contribute towards successful behaviour change in real-life settings. The model has been criticised for being overcomplicated though, and it has been suggested that some of the stages could be removed. Kraft et al. 1999 thought that there should just be 2 stages, pre-contemplation and everything else that comes after this. This poses issues as the model does suggest certain methods of support during each of the stages, and means that it possibly is not good at explaining change or advising on treatment options. The answer provides a thorough discussion of Prochaska's 6-stage model of behaviour change in the context of addictive behaviour. It demonstrates a clear understanding of the model and theory. The response begins by very clearly summarising the main points of the model, emphasising it's a gradual process and acknowledging the chance of relapse. This is crucial in addiction treatment. This is further elaborated upon in the following evaluative paragraph, where the significance of recognising relapse as a normal part of the process is highlighted. The point explain consequence structure is effectively used to present and elaborate on this point. The answer then returns to AO1 and offers a detailed description of each stage of the model, providing examples and explanations for better understanding. This demonstrates a good knowledge of the stages and their significance in addiction treatment. The response then returns to further evaluation and looks at 2 more strengths and another limitation. The mention of Parker and Parikh's 2001 study provides supporting evidence for the effectiveness of the model and really enhances the credibility of the argument. Similarly, the critique by Kraft et al. 1999 is introduced to acknowledge potential weaknesses, and this provides a balanced evaluation. As we've said before, each of the evaluative paragraphs is fully developed using that point, explain and consequence structure. Technical language is used appropriately throughout the response, and this helps to offer clarity and precision to the answer. Terms such as versatility, dynamic process and intervention have all been used. So overall, the answer effectively discusses Prochaska's 6-stage model of behaviour in addiction. It provides detailed AO1 knowledge of the model and then a well-structured and developed AO3 evaluation. Appropriate examples are used and technical language is used throughout.
Ouch! This is why in some videos I explain scratches.